Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
'Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. There's still time, the AFTN Soccer Show, broadcasting on CITR Radio, 101.9 FM from the unceded Musqueam Territory at the University of beautiful British Columbia. I'm Michael McCall.
And I'm Felipe Vallejo.
And we're back with another packed show. Lots of Whitecaps chat, lots of MLS chat. The Whitecaps played their first competitive game of 2025. We'll look at that in this part. We'll look ahead to the Portland game coming up on Sunday to kick off the MLS matches. We'll bring some audio from Whitecaps head coach Jesper Sorensen after that game against Saprissa in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and hear a little bit from Phil Neville as well ahead of Sunday's Cascadia Cup clash. We'll also be previewing the MLS West, and I'll be bringing you a special collaboration with SoccerWise podcast where I preview the Whitecaps 2025 season to come as well. So all of that still to come. Before we get into that, welcome back to the show, Felipe, and welcome back as well after a nice trip to Colombia. I was enjoying the photos you were sharing on your Instagram, and you seem to have a really nice time going back home.
I had a lovely time going back to Colombia, my first time in 11 years, and I chose the perfect time to go because as soon as I left, I seemed to have brought the snow in. And so I missed the winter wonderland that I was left here in Vancouver while I can't even say I was in sunny Colombia because in the capital it's actually quite cloudy and rainy, but at least it wasn't snowy and at least it was still quite warm. So I think I definitely got the better end of that deal for the 10 days that I was over there. And I got some delicious food and I got to see some family again. So it was a very nice trip.
Oh, the food stuff you were sharing looked amazing.
Oh, it's different gravy over there. Literally, it's
Literally.
everything. Yeah, it's so good. The food there, everything tastes fresher. It tastes cleaner, and it's just the food there is a dream of. Genuinely, I still am thinking about it now. I've tried my best to recreate some of the Colombian dishes, but it just doesn't hit the same as it does when it's made straight from the source.
I mean, I love Mexican food. I mean, how different is Colombian food to Mexican food?
I think Colombian food is a lot less spicy, a lot less focus on spiciness. Colombian food, I think, it still has a lot of roots in sort of like indigenous kind of foods and still a lot of focus on like maize and on like corn flour and stuff like that. Like traditional dishes like arepas is made from cornmeal, a special kind of cornmeal. So there are some similarities to Mexican cuisine because of the indigenous roots, but it obviously has its own style. Colombia has a lot of really delicious soups that are based on like chicken and beef and it's so nice to be able to have a lot of those foods there because a lot of the specialty dishes you can't recreate here because they require special herbs that only grow in the very, very special climate that obviously is Colombia by the equator. So the best thing you can do is try to import it, but obviously it's pricey and it's rare.
And also importing plant-based things from Colombia, it's going to get
a little bit of a struggle.
It's going to get stopped at customs.
Yeah, that one I had a little bit of concern, especially since my connection was through Dallas,
Oh
Texas.
yeah.
And so I was clutching onto my Canadian passport very, very heavily in case anybody asked, especially on the return when I was flying from Bogota to Dallas, Texas. I basically had it in my hand the entire time I was going through customs in the US. But thankfully, I made it out okay.
And you didn't bring any Colombian players back with you, so that was a disappointment.
Yeah, no, Agent Felipe did not work out over there in Colombia, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, maybe the Whitecaps will bring some players back from Costa Rica with them because we'll talk Whitecaps getting back into the groove. Their first competitive game took place. We're recording this on Thursday night, the 20th of February. And I mean, for most of the game, I thought, oh, we're going to be having a fun chat about the Whitecaps starting the season with a victory or at the very worst, a draw, but went down to a late 2-1 defeat in CONCACAF Champions Cup action down in San Juan, Costa Rica against Deportivo Saprissa. Now, they put in a pretty good performance. They led through an early round goal, 21st minute, led at half time, looked comfortable. Were playing the better football. Saprissa weren't really threatening too much. They had Kendall Waston up front as a surprise. Like we'd seen him thrown up front even when he was with the Whitecaps in the past. But to start the game was a bit of an unusual one. I think part of that, though, tying in with what we were talking about with our chat with him last episode and then some stuff off record as well, is putting him up against some of the pacey Whitecaps players at the back maybe wasn't going to be the best idea. But it was quite an old Saprissa team because I'm down in the US at the moment just for the game coming up on Sunday. So I had the Fox Sports 2 feed and the commentator was explaining on that at the start of the game. Every Saprissa player was 30 years and older.
Oh, I didn't know
In
they
the
were that
starting
old.
11, every starter was 30 years and older. They had a couple of young guys, obviously, that came off the bench. And the average age of the Whitecaps was 26, but their only player 30 or older was Sam. So there was a lot of experience on that Saprissa team, but they didn't show it in the first half. But they flicked a switch in the second, I think, as the tiredness came in for the Whitecaps. First competitive game of the year, the heat down there, and they kind of toiled a little bit. I think a draw would have been a fair result in the end, but they got an away goal, but now they go into BC Place next week, Felipe, needing to at least score one.
Yeah, and it's not even just needing to score one. They also can't really afford to concede one
Mhm.
either because the fact that Saprissa scored two at home, yes, they got an away goal, but now if Saprissa gets an away goal, they have to score two minimum just to make sure they don't get out, and then it goes
Mhm.
to extra time and everything. They score one realistically, Whitecaps have to score three. So defensively, it's going to be a lot of pressure as well because you're looking at, what maybe Jesper wants more than anything is like a 1 or a 2-0 win to just assure it that you can let Saprissa score in the trip to BC play. So it's gonna be pressure on both ends of the pitch for the Whitecaps. But yeah, definitely a disappointing end because, like you mentioned, it was a promising start. Obviously, Saprissa and just CONCACAF, when you're facing those Central American teams, it's going to be a very gritty, it's going to be a very cagey, physical affair, a lot of stop start, a lot of fouls, a lot of little flares of tension and fighting, and that's what makes CONCACAF CONCACAF.
It was a physical game. I enjoyed it. The ref seemed to let a lot go, and then some tackles when you saw them back, it's like, I mean, that's a borderline red card.
Yeah,
I
he
think
the
Kupis was lucky for his little scissor kick. If it had just been off the ground, I think that could have been a red. But then there was a tackle, I can't remember which Whitecaps player it was on, but it was right in his ankle. And it was over the top. And I mean, that was a borderline red as well.
Yeah, I think that yeah, was it on Sebastian? Was it on Berhalter? I think it might have been.
Maybe.
Uh but
In the
yeah,
first half.
yeah. The referee was definitely, I mean, we've seen him before like in like CONCACAF Nations League. He was in the 2022 World Cup, which is where I recognized him.
Yeah,
He
he looked familiar and I couldn't place where I'd seen him.
Yeah, so like I knew where he was, and I remember that he was always a referee that let a lot of things go. So wasn't too surprised to see as many fouls as there were, but I think there was combined like 30 fouls altogether between the two sides.
Yeah, 31. Just looking at the stats here. 31
30.
fouls, 7 bookings, 4 for Saprissa, 3 for the Whitecaps.
Yeah, so very, as expected, very, very physical affair. And I thought in the first half, the Whitecaps actually dealt with it quite well.
Yeah.
They were able to kind of like, obviously, the first 10, 15 minutes was super cagey, was balls in the air, was trying to establish, who can settle the game first. In the end, it was the Whitecaps. And then after the first 15, 20 minutes, as soon as Ryan Gauld's goal went in, it kind of felt like, okay, the Whitecaps got this under control.
Mhm.
They were passing it around. They were being patient. They were frustrating Saprissa. They weren't, buying into their dramatics. They weren't kind of stooping down to that level, and they weren't getting out muscled or bullied. And I thought, okay, great. This is exactly how you want to deal with a Central American side in Central America, where the stadium was packed and everyone's whistling, and it's, kind of a volatile environment. Second half comes in, and it's like they forgot the instructions
Mm.
altogether. From the first whistle of the second half, it was just all Saprissa. And they immediately start to get bullied. Immediately you start to see players getting angry. You saw that fight later in the half between Ali Ahmed and Douglas Takeda
Yeah.
that they almost came to fists because Ali Ahmed said something to Takeda.
Yeah,
Takeda
I'd love to know
pushed
what
him
was
back.
said because there was stuff said both ways.
Exactly. We'll need an expert lip reader to tell us what
I don't
happened
know.
there.
I think maybe we don't want to know some of that.
Very true.
But no, I mean,
But
Saprissa were good in the second half,
yeah.
and Whitecaps did ride their luck. There was the borderline offside where he ended up hitting it off the post and then buried the rebound. But he was off, but it was so tight that if he had just held his run for maybe 1 second, he'd have been in there. Whitecaps, though, as well had their chances. But I
Yeah.
think the disappointing thing is they only had 2 shots on target.
Yes, and I think both of them, or was both of them from Pedro Ite, or
Well, Gold's with the goal.
oh right, oh you mean in total? I thought that was just second half.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, yeah, just in total, it was just 2 on target for the whole game.
Oh wow.
10
Yeah.
shots for the
So
game, and then just 2 on target. So, I mean, Gold took his goal well. The keeper should have done better. I know he was going one way and he was wrong-footed and maybe just couldn't fully get his power on it. But you want your keeper to parry that away at least, like just palm it away.
yeah, I feel like it was a great finish overall, just a technique from
Yeah.
Gold. But yeah, it didn't have that much power on it that you think like the goalie has nothing. The goalie got something on it, probably should have pushed it wide. But regardless, really nice team move
Oh,
and.
beautiful
At
pass from Ali Ahmed.
Yeah, a great pass from Ali Ahmed, and then JC Ngando, and for the first like half an hour, you can even say the first half, I thought he was really solid. Like I was surprised that he was in the starting lineup instead of Pedro Lite, but the first 15, 20, 25 minutes, I was like, okay, maybe we're seeing why he was in the starting lineup with the passes that he was making and the way that he was linking up with the attack. But I felt like second half change needed to happen, and I actually liked the fact that Jesper Sorensen brought in Pedro Vite because Pedro Vite immediately came in and brought a different kind of energy, started
Yeah.
to run at Saprissa more, started to kind of make them a little nervous, make them sweat a bit, had like two or three decent opportunities
The one where
to
he was in
score.
on goal, he just slightly overhit it as he
Yeah.
broke through, and it was just, oh,
And I'm pretty sure that came right before
yeah,
the exactly the winner. So it made it even
yeah.
more frustrating that it didn't go in. But there were some decent performances. I thought the defense up until obviously the winner did quite well. The first goal, you can't blame it on the defense. You could argue that should be one of the midfielders putting some pressure on Torres, but I don't think anybody, not even anybody in the stadium, I don't think anybody watching expected the ball to fly as it did off of um, uh, Mariano Torres' left boot and into the far corner. I saw some people blaming Yohei Takaoka about it, if you see it in real time from his perspective, that is flying. Like that has
Yeah, it
pace,
had a
power.
swerve on it as well.
Yeah, like
It curled. Like that was a beautiful goal.
yeah, it was a one in a million goal. Like I don't think he could do that 99 more times. He won't be able to hit it as sweetly as he did that one. That one you just kind of hold your hands up and say, they know as former Whitecaps coach Vanny says sometimes you just have to applaud and say fantastic goal and move on. The second goal is the one that really, really hurts for the
Yeah.
Whitecaps
Yeah, because
because
actually I mentioned Torres was in and hit the post. It was Rodriguez that was in and hit the post. I just realised because then he got the winner. I mean, you've got to be stronger in the tackle to get that away. Or at
yeah,
least not let the shot get off. Just stronger with the block.
yeah, I'd say so. I think obviously like if you want to be nitpicky on the first goal, that's what you would say. Um, but overall, like I think even outside of that, the defense, I thought Ranko and Blackman and Matthias Laborda especially showed a lot of experience. Anytime that the crosses went in, they were always there. They were always the first ones to deal with it aerially. I thought they were super, super strong. And in their individual duels, I thought the defense was really good today.
Hmm.
It was just in the final, 5, 10 minutes where it all sort of broke apart. There was a communication breakdown. Fantastic song by Led Zeppelin. And it led to a really, really, really poor goal to concede. And as much as I love the signing of Jane Nelson, he's going to have a lot to learn after that second goal because him and Sam Adekugbe, I think they both expected each other to mark the Saprissa player, and neither of them did. They just watched him take the ball, bring it into the box, cross it in for Rodriguez to take a touch and then score into the back of the net. It was one of those schoolyard that's what I expect my VMSL boys to do. I don't. That's not what I expect a Whitecaps team to concede that kind of goal.
No. And at least I can't remember from his time at TFC how much defensive work Nelson put in. But he's going to know MLS is a league where these guys, you need to come back, you need to be better. So it's just getting on the same page. It will come. The lineup for this was interesting because I thought Nelson would get the start. And then when he didn't, I thought, I guess they're looking ahead to Sunday. Because Jesper said the whole time that he's going to mix things up. It won't be wholesale changes, but there'll be different starters for the two games. So I think we'll probably see Nelson get the start on Sunday instead of Ali, or at least maybe Ali might drop into the midfield for Gando and
Yeah,
have Nelson out wide for that. So we'll maybe get to see what he can do. I think his pace will trouble teams, and Saprissa did seem to have a little bit of trouble with some of the pace that the Whitecaps showed throughout the game. I mean, can we learn much from this?
I don't. I mean, some things. I think you can definitely get some insights from this game in terms of their defensive structure. You could see that, especially at the beginning, what you can see exactly what Jesper Sorensen wants, and them pressuring high as a unit, as a team, and trying to win the ball back high up the pitch, and whenever they lose possession, to make it as hard as possible for Saprissa to properly build out when the ball's in contention like that. So there's some things that you can definitely, gather from it, and some of the way that when they were on the ball, they were a lot more patient with it than when we saw the Whitecaps play under Vanni Sartini.
Hmm.
It wasn't always trying to do those quick 1-2 passes between Brian and Ryan, trying to break up the pitch as quickly as possible. No, they have a little bit more patience, trying to open those gaps, be able to fill those gaps, and then once they have them, then they can attack at pace. So there are some things that I liked from the game overall. Obviously, it's rusty. Obviously, still for Jesper Sorensen, it's been a month of
Yes.
him being with the club, so you're not going to see his philosophy, exemplified perfectly. There were overall a lot of positives that I can take for it. It's just, the preseason rust where they're still not quite as sharp as Saprissa were, and I think in the end that was the difference, is that Saprissa at the very end, the 95th minute, were being sharp. They were playing clever with the quick throw-ins and everything. Well, the Whitecaps were kind of still in preseason mode, not fully 100% focused on the task at hand and playing as that kind of collective. And that was what allowed Saprissa to score and take the advantage into the second leg.
When I went to 1-0, I was thinking, great, get a second here, and then not so much take it easy, but it's going to make the next two games team selection a little bit easier because you can maybe go full strength for Sunday and then not as full strength the second leg because you've got a couple of goals, a couple of away goals, and everything would have been great. Now, there's a lot to think about, and it's all to play for next Thursday at BC Place. I liked a lot of what I saw. Everything that you said there basically echo that. They did play patient, especially in the first half. The midfield still needs some tweaking, I think.
Hmm.
Gando impressed me when I was out at training last Wednesday because he was flying. And at first I didn't recognise him. And at first I thought it was Sabi. And I was like, oh, he's looking good. And then I was talking to Brandon, and he's like, "Oh no, that's JC." And it's like, "Oh geez, he's seems to have shot up from when I saw him before he went off to Las Vegas." But I like the look of him, and they think quite highly of him, along with Tate Johnson. I think defensively they are going to be quite solid as well. And Jesper said afterwards, they just need to not give up stupid goals like they did. And let's hear a little bit actually from the post-game comments now from Jesper Sorensen after his first game officially in charge of the Whitecaps, just his thoughts on the match and what he can glean from that and the result.
What can you to do different in BC Place to advance?
Not allow goals in situations where we shouldn't. Of course, that could be a good start. But to me, we played in many ways an okay game. In second half, it became a little bit passive, but we had some big chances. We could have put the game away, but we didn't, and that's sometimes what you need to do, especially in a difficult away game.
Coach, do you think the atmosphere in the stadium in the last few minutes was a great boost for Saprissa? How did you feel about the atmosphere in this stadium? Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course, it's very passionate audience and spectators, and it's a great atmosphere here. Of course, the spectators try to give the push for the home team. I don't think that the last part of the game was the worst from us. I don't think that the pressure was that heavy on us in the end, but yeah, of course, the fans animated also the teams to go even more forward. So of course that's how it is playing at home with very passionate fans as well.
How will you prepare the second game, knowing that the away goal counts in the tournament? Thank you.
Yeah, of course we know the away goal. It was an important goal for us to score, but yeah, we know that we have to go out and win a game at home at BC Place, and that will be what we will have to focus on. Of course, it is going to be second leg of the tie here, so we will be prepared to try to win the game, and we also know how we will like and have to play it.
What did you learn from your team tonight? It's the first time you've seen them play in a competitive game. Obviously, they looked a little tired towards the end with the first game. So what did you learn? What positives can you take from tonight?
Yeah, I think that the players, they really hung in there. I know it was first game of the year, and it was a difficult match to play here away at Saprissa. So I think that the players really stood out with and showed their heart. Everybody on the pitch. Unfortunately, it's the worst way of losing a game when you lose it in the last minute. So that was that I think is a bit disappointing for all of us. But I think that all players did absolute everything, and they showed that they really a really high commitment and a strong heart.
Before the game, you had talked about the fact that in CONCACAF matches against teams like Saprissa, they will always try to be very physical, and it'll be difficult to sort of set a rhythm in the game. It felt like in the second half, Saprissa were able to stop your team from setting that rhythm as it did in the first half. How are you hoping to maybe avoid from that happening in the second leg at BC Place?
Yeah, that's true. Second half, we became a little bit more insecure maybe in when we had the ball, but also played because the pitch was so open, very direct. We could have waited a bit more and held the ball for longer time and not playing so direct, but that's difficult when the pitch is open. So we will definitely have to see in the second leg that how we can manage to control the game a little bit better.
I'm wondering, Jesper, if you can tell us what you saw from your side on the last minute goal.
I saw that they took 3 fast throw-ins, and then I think we made a big mistake jumping out. We were not communicating well. So everybody was running towards the ball instead of just keeping cool and staying in position, which opened up space. They threw it in quickly. And I think it was a big mistake. We could have avoided it easily. So that was maybe the hectical parts in the last minute where people were a little bit tired in the first game here. But that's something we have to learn from, definitely.
He's the gaffer. You can try it on with him. He's the gaffer. Even when he's on a limb. He's the gaffer. When his back's against the wall, has the answer to it all.
Jesper Sorensen there, just chatting a little bit about the game. All to play for now in the second leg. Hopefully they can get a good crowd out. Just over 10,000 down in Costa Rica for this one. Saprissa is going to sit back, you feel, on Thursday, and the Whitecaps are going to have to try and break them down as they look to hit in the counter.
And I think that's going to be the biggest test for Jesper Sorensen, because previously we've seen that when Vanny was the coach, the Whitecaps really struggled to break down those low blocks because they relied on those fast transitional moments. When the team is just sitting back, they don't give you that opportunity to have those fast transitional moments to sort of counterattack. You need to unlock that defense. And before they only had to they relied on Ryan Gauld providing some sort of magic to be able to do that. And he's only one guy, as great of a player as he is. Now the test for Jesper Sorensen is, okay, you're playing a more positional kind of patient play. How are you going to be able to turn that into unlocking a low block and a very, they're going to be out there and I know that their number one job is not even just to defend, but it's to frustrate. They're going to call every foul. They're going to look for every foul. They're going to cause every foul, and they're going to try to just frustrate the Whitecaps, break play as even more than they did in this first game, just really frustrate the hell out of the Whitecaps. So it's going to be big for both Jesper and the team to show the character that they have, the mental that they have to stay focused, to not give in to those mind games, and to really be able to stretch that Saprissa defense, create those opportunities, and more importantly, score them. Because you're not going to get that many opportunities, I think, against a team that's going to be sitting in that low block. I mean, they were already in a 5-back out of possession. They're going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if they have 6 or 7 players, basically.
Well, I think they had 7 defenders on the pitch in total. Not all played defence.
No, of course.
I mean, they've got, with Kendall, they'll try again, I think, maybe to put him up front and just to kind of frustrate them, because he's a big bulldozer of a guy. So, it's going to be an interesting second leg. Hopefully the fans can get out in numbers. First game of the season at home, and looking forward to it. Mentioned Kendall Waston there. Now, last week we had our big, extensive 50-minute chat with Kendall. Of course, we didn't ask him our big, important questions. Does he fancy a chocolate digestive? What is his favourite jam? What is his takeout food of choice? But of course, we did ask him that, and we've put them all together in an all-in-one section now. So, if you're sitting at home and it's like morning, mid-afternoon, and you want to have a hot beverage, a hot drink, what is your hot drink of choice? A tea, a coffee, a mate, maybe?
Hot coffee.
And do you have like a black coffee and an espresso, a latte, cappuccino?
A black coffee. I have the blender, everything properly.
Oh, you have the Costa Rican coffee maker.
Yes, sir.
I have one now too.
Well, I mean, Costa Rica is known for its coffee as well, which is obviously a good thing. Like, do you have a sweet tooth? Do you like sweet treats?
Yes, sir. Oh,
Oh.
yo.
Oh, what would be your sweet treat of choice then to have with a coffee?
A nice croissant.
You know, see the amount of football players that say croissant, and I think that's such an unhealthy thing. But I mentioned that to Jaden Nelson, and he was like, "Yeah, but we burn it off." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's true."
That's fair. Fair enough.
True. I'll ask you our other food segments as well, just in case we haven't asked you that. So if you're at home then, and you're wanting to have like some toast or a muffin, and you want to have some jam in it, what's your favorite jam?
Strawberry jam?
Oh.
Yeah.
And our last thing we do is about takeout food. What's your takeout food of choice? Obviously you've got a great wife. I'm sure Priscilla's a great cook, unlike my wife. But that's a joke I do in all the episodes, and I cut it out. But and she's downstairs listening just now. This is going to be interesting when I go back down. But if you decide to have takeout food, what is your takeout food of choice?
My takeout food would be oh my goodness. Let me see. A nice not a burger. I'm not a burger guy, but would be like a wrap.
Oh, that's good, because I was going to say, if we've got time, we'd like to treat you and your family to a nice meal, and a wrap sounds nice and cheap. So
Nice.
that's straight up my street if we can take you out before the game. You might obviously have other plans and you might not have time, but I'm looking forward to seeing you when you come here, Kendall. It's going to be fantastic.
Thank you. Sorry for the commercial, but one place that I want to go is Cactus Club.
Oh, okay.
Did you
Sort that.
Did you live in the Monterey for a while?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you were right next to the Cactus.
Every day.
Yeah.
I think I've got some gift cards from there. That sounds like we could do this.
I love you, Michael.
Priscilla told me she wants to go to Cactus Club badly. Yeah.
Cactus Club's really nice. Right, let's get that sorted.
Take me out.
Kendall Waston there, just rounding off our little fun segments. We never got to do that with him when he was here, so we did it for there. He'll be here at BC Place next Thursday. We'll see if he can frustrate the Whitecaps. We'll see if they can get the job done. But before that, they've got a big MLS season opener to come down in Oregon. Cascadian Derby against Portland Timbers. The team they dismantled 5-0 in the playoffs. You know they're out for revenge. You know that's been circled by everyone of a Timbers persuasion. They're kicking off their 50th anniversary season. They want to do it in style. They'll feel they'll be facing a tired Whitecaps team. It's an interesting one, Felipe. But we'll touch a little bit on where we think the Whitecaps will do this year later on when we do our kind of season preview for the whole MLS West. But how are you feeling heading into this season and this game against Portland?
I think based on this game and based on everything, I am feeling more than anything just ambivalent. Because
that's not a good thing, and that seems to be a bit of a consensus from people.
yeah, and it's not because of apathy, or it's not because of maybe, some people are always cynical, and are always going to be cynical with the Whitecaps. It's literally just because I don't feel like I have enough to go off of. And as someone that, I studied in philosophy and everything, when you don't have enough to go off of, you're supposed to just suspend judgment. You're not supposed to judge either way and just wait until you get more information. So I'm trying to take a little bit of that practice going into this one, and I'm not going to be judging either way based on what I've seen, but just because we've seen so little of Jesper, and just because we've seen so little of what this team is going to look like, I really don't know. This could be a team that, is way better than what we saw previously under Vanny, or this team could be worse or on par. I have no idea. That's the thing. It's exciting for sure to see what this new look Whitecaps side is, but at the same time, you got to be aware that, they lost Stewart They brought in a couple of nice pieces, but is it enough to kind of really give you that burst and swell of confidence, saying, "Oh, this is the new Whitecaps. We're pushing it to another level"? Not yet, but that doesn't mean it won't be.
Yeah. I mean, we know Sabi's out for 2 to 4 weeks. Ankle injury. It looked worse, but it's not as bad as first feared. So it could be 2 to 4 weeks. So have to wait a little bit before we see him. Daniel Rios still isn't up to speed. Not sure he'll even feature off the bench on Sunday, but maybe with a week under his belt, he could feature in the second leg against Saprissa. I'm assuming they've added him to the CONCACAF roster. Maybe they haven't even done that yet. But for this game on Sunday, I went on the pre-game call with Phil Neville today. Portland are missing some key players, aside from Evander, who got transferred, and we'll do our Portland preview in part 3. But missing on Sunday, Jonathan Rodriguez, Juan Mosquera, Santiago Moreno, and probably new DP signing David Da Costa. He might be able to feature on the bench, but there was no promises there. So that's some big pieces missing for Portland. So this is a good time to get them. But at the same time, the Whitecaps are going into this an 8-hour flight from Costa Rica. They'll be tired. It was grueling conditions. I don't know what to expect from Sunday. Right now, I'd take a point.
Yeah, I feel like you mentioned, I feel like with the players that are missing and without them having Evander, and we'll talk about it when we get there, when we talk about Portland, I feel like, in a similar vein, I don't really know what to make of Portland right now. I don't think that they are obviously as strong as they were last season, but I also don't think the Whitecaps are going to be putting up another 5-0 show like we saw in the wild card match at the end of last season. So I think a draw is a very safe bet, but also I think the smart bet. In this one, I don't think that there are better games really for the Whitecaps to kind of try things out than against Portland. Obviously, if it was at home, it'd be a little bit better, but I think Portland are a good test for where the Whitecaps are, similar to in the game that I mentioned about with Saprissa at home. But I feel like that will kind of show us like, okay, now in league play, what are you really about? And can you take advantage of a Portland side that has a bunch of injuries and let go of their star player and maybe doesn't have as much confidence as they have had previously? I think that'll be interesting to see if they can take advantage of that. But I think overall right now I'm looking at it and thinking these are two sides that have a lot to prove and have a lot of parallels between them. Both lost star players. I know Portland replaced them allegedly, but the Whitecaps haven't.
Portland's star player was a bit better than the one that we lost.
Yeah, it's very true. Very, very true. So they're kind of in somewhat similar situations. So yeah, it's going to be a fun game, and I'm going to be interested to see who kind of takes it home in that pairing.
I mean, it's also difficult for Neville because you're scouting a team with a new coach that you haven't seen play until tonight. So I mean, he'll glean a little bit from the Saprissa game. I mean, it could all be mind games from Neville as well, and these 4 guys turn up in the pitch on Sunday. So we'll see if he was telling the truth or not. But let's just round this bit off with a little bit from Phil Neville, just talking about their eventful off-season and looking ahead to Sunday's game with the Whitecaps.
It's going down. It's going down. I'm yelling timber.
Hey guys, how we doing? We go again. No, I'm really excited for the start of the MLS season this weekend. I think it's felt like a long but productive off season. Got to say the preseason was really good. We really enjoyed the preseason, probably more than I did last preseason because of I felt more settled with the team, in the job, in the city, in everything around the working environment. So that was good, and. Whatever you do in pre-season, all the work that you put in, it now comes to the real action, and we're looking forward to starting the season on Sunday.
Obviously, Evander has left. David Da Costa's in. What have you seen from him in his first couple training sessions with the team?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of him, so it's not just the training sessions, but he's adjusting really well to his teammates, to the environment. We don't know yet whether he's going to be available for the weekend, so I think that's probably the next step. We want to see him in action. We want to see him gelling with his teammates. That takes a little bit of time, but he's been really, really impressive around the place. He trained with the team for the first time yesterday in terms of a full team session. He's been doing a lot of individual work, and he showed qualities that we need in our starting 11. And I can't wait to get him involved. Hopefully, it will be this weekend. But that's probably a long shot.
Besides DaCosta's visa situation, can you kind of give us more of a wider injury update on the team, how Jonathan Rodriguez is doing, what he's dealing with, and then also Santiago Moreno, who's training on the side today?
Yeah, we've had to suffer a little bit in pre-season. So in terms of this weekend, no Rodriguez, no Moreno, no Mosquera. He's only trained 2 days. He'll be on the bench at the very, very maximum. He still needs 10 days to 2 weeks. He's missed the whole of pre-season.
Who are you looking to this season in the team to step up and have maybe just an impressive season?
I think what's important to say is that we're going to be a different team this year. There's going to be a new identity, a new style of play, because the players are different. The players that we've brought in will make us a different team. And I think what I always thought about us last year was we were a team of really, really good individuals. And sometimes when obviously we sent them out onto the pitch, individuals don't always win you championships, don't win you games, don't get you success. And I feel this year, particularly with the signings that we've made, we're going to be a better team. A team that when it goes out on the pitch, we're going to know what we're going to get from that team. And that as a coach is a really good place to be, because there was probably times last year when we were rolling the dice about which version of the team we were going to see. And we saw our inconsistencies throughout the whole season, but particularly through many games where we would have periods of really good play, exciting play, score goals, and then there was periods where we would concede goals and not stick to the plan and be really inconsistent. So what I expect this year and what we've planned on all season is the consistency in our play. I think the consistency gets you success. And we're a new team. We're a young team. I think just looking through the roster, Mosquera's young, Finn Sermon's young, David Acosta's young, Anthony's young, Jimmy Four's young, David Ayala's young, Kevin Kelsey's young, all below the age of 24, which is really exciting. Ian Smith's really young, no experience in the team. So we're going to need those young players to really step up, and we're going to need the senior players to grab hold of those young players and say, right, you're coming on this journey with us. These are the do's and the don'ts. These is what you need to do. So we're putting a lot of expectation on the younger players, but we're also putting even more expectation on the senior players to make sure that we help those young players, because those young players are going to be stars. Trust me, we've got some incredibly talented young players now. And I think it's going to be exciting seeing them grow over this last season. And what we saw over the last 12 months, we saw a player develop from an $8 million player, $8 million player to a $12 million player. We've got other players in the team that some of the top clubs in the world are now inquiring about, wanting and seeing the development. So we're a club that likes to develop players and improve players, and I think that's really exciting for this group of players. And it's exciting for me and the staff to see the growth in every single player.
It writes itself getting a chance to open with Vancouver. And I know it's a new team, but I know there are players that were on the team last year that felt that loss. How much did you obsess over that loss and the way the season ended, and just how much of a motivating force was that going into the offseason?
I mean, it was definitely a motivating factor in terms of the work that we needed to do. I think what it did, it just speeded up the process of what we wanted to do. We knew we were in that little bit of a transition rebuild focus, and I think it transitioned into we needed to act really quickly. And I think in the early part of the off season there was a period where we probably didn't make many moves, and there was a lot of frustration probably from outside the club. But we had a clear plan and clear strategy. Now we've probably accomplished 90% of what we wanted to do in the off-season. There's still probably 10% to go. So, but the players we brought in have got outstanding qualities, both on and off the pitch. And we're playing against a team that's got a new manager, some new players, but the feeling of that last game should be our motivation. That feeling of that last game should have been the motivation all off season to come back even fitter, even stronger, even more motivated. And we start the season with a clean slate. And for me, it's a Cascadia game. I was at a fan event on Tuesday, and the Cascadia Cup is still one of the most important parts and most important goals for this football club, and especially for the supporters. And we want to make sure we give the supporters what they want.
It's going down. It's going down. I'm yelling timber.
Portland coach Phil Neville there, and we'll touch on it when we do our Portland preview in part 3. But big season ahead for the Englishman. I'm not sure it's a season that he makes it out of, but hopefully it's an entertaining start to the season. Hopefully it's a good game down in Portland, because I am down to take it in. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, and we'll just see what we make of it. But that is it for the Whitecaps on the pitch, what's to come on the pitch for now. We're going to turn our attention to the rest of the MLS West in the next 2 parts as we bring you our season preview, and we'll be back with the first part of that, our first 7 teams, after this episode's song from our album of the month.
Hi, I'm Ryan Gold, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
So welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, it's probably not the final song, because I think we'll have another show out before the month ends, but it's our penultimate song from our album of the month for February. English band Pop Will Eat Itself. Their album that we're featuring is their debut effort, Box Frenzy, from 1987, and a beautiful love song there from it. So many love songs, or what I call love songs, on the album, and that was Inside You. And now, instead of being inside you, we're going to get inside the transfer dealings and the coming and going in MLS West. We're going to take a look at all 14 other teams outside of Vancouver. I mean, Felipe, if you look at the table just now, Vancouver's already bottom alphabetically, so that's not a good start to the season. But we'll delve into 7 teams in this part, 7 teams in the next part. We'll try and keep it short, we'll try and keep it tight. We'll try and do 5 minutes per team. Some might need a couple of minutes more. Some might not need as much as 5 minutes, because it's been a little bit quiet off-season for some teams, but we'll do it alphabetically, and we'll kick things off looking at Austin. They finished in 10th in 2024, 5 points below the playoff line, 11 wins, 9 draws, 14 defeats. They were the lowest scorers in the West with just 39 goals, and you'd think, Felipe, that they would be super busy this off-season, but they've only brought 5 players in, and 9 players have moved out. The key player moving out Let's get into that right away. Sebastian Driussi, transferred to River Plate. Austin received $10 million for him, and they've got a sell-on fee as well of 8.25%. But that's a big, big loss for Austin.
Yeah, I mean, he was a key player for them, and I think one of the biggest issues that they had, obviously, given how little goals they score, is that he didn't really have anybody to sort of play off of, and he's such a good creative player that to not have a good strike force in front of you to put away the chances you're creating. I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been for him. But I mean, a big money move to Argentina, River Plate, a storied club for him. It's going to be a positive move for him, and I think that it's a bit of a shame for Austin because as soon as they sell him, they bring in some big attackers that are known for scoring goals, which would be nice for him to have last season.
Yeah, five players coming in, 3 midfielders, 2 forwards, and some good pieces. I mean, some don't really know too much about. Eli Sanchez coming in as a free agent. Previously, 5 seasons with KC, 3 with LAFC. Brandon Vasquez coming in from Monterrey, American international, who signed for what was then a team record $10 million coming in as a designated player. But a couple of days after that, a new club record, $12 million spent for Albanian Mirto Uzuni. So the third DP for Austin is Ghanaian Osman Bakari, who's already with the club. But 2 big pieces there. Uzuni, who I don't really know anything about. Brandon Vasquez, obviously, do know as the American international. But 22 million spent on those 2 DPs. Austin looked like they mean some business.
Yeah, and when you look at the goal scoring record from both of them, Brandon Vasquez was somebody that MLS fans will know from his time at FC Cincinnati, where he had a good last season before he moved on to play in the Mexican League with Rayados. Didn't go too well for him overall there. He's back in MLS, but he's shown that he can score goals. And then Uzuni actually is also somebody that is a pretty hot form too. He came from Granada in Spain. And when I was looking at him, he scored 14 goals in 18 games in La Liga 2 this season. So yeah, so he comes in good form, and hopefully he can, for Austin fans, he can provide those goals that they were so desperately missing last season.
I mean, it definitely looks that they've strengthened in that regard. And obviously they still have to keep the ball out of the back off the net. I couldn't help but think, though, like if the Whitecaps splashed 12 million on an Albanian, the fans here would lose their shit. Just because it's been like, it's an Albanian. Why are they signing a player from a country like that? But then you look at the record and it's like, it doesn't matter where they come from. And I think that's part of the problem here. Folk want this big name, but it doesn't matter if you get the right player and the player that can do the business.
Very true. I feel like a lot of fans, maybe because they're more used to European football, they want those classic names from like those classic countries. You see a Brazilian name and you immediately think about the flair and the Joga Bonita and stuff like that. You hear a name like Mirto Uzuni from Albania, maybe it doesn't strike that same passion as you would if you had a Brazilian name, but you gotta look at the stats, and in this day and age, you gotta look at what they are actually capable of doing, not only in terms of their goal scores, but the deeper stats and stuff like that. And I think splashing that cash, I mean, to be fair, I think Whitecaps fans would be happy just in general if they splash that kind of cash, dropping 12 million like that. I think regardless who it was, as long as they seem somewhat worth it, I think they'd be happy just for it to see the team kind of spending big. But I kind of like when teams kind of spend big on these kind of somewhat unknown players because it brings more to the league. We don't want to be known as, again, the retirement league that just gets the old stars. You want to bring in new stars, people that might not know who these players are. And then you never know, he might go on a tear this season for Austin and score 15, 20 goals. And now everybody knows Uzuni's name. I think that's one of the draws of MLS.
Yeah. And they just missed last year by 5. And with these additions and the money spent, you would hope that they're going to get a return for that. Although, if you're a Vancouver fan, you would hope that they are going to stay below the Whitecaps in the table. But it does feel that they've got a better team with regard to scoring, and they could be playoff contenders this year.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even looking at like their defensive record too, they only conceded 48, which on that record, it should have put them like that was the same amount that Real Salt Lake conceded, and they finished third. It was literally just about scoring goals. So now that they have two proven goal scorers, one especially in the MLS, things should, in theory, on paper, look a lot better for Austin. So I wouldn't be surprised if they push up from 10th into those first 5-6 places.
Colorado next, and they're an interesting one. They were 7th last year, bounced in the first round of the playoffs by LA Galaxy. They had 50 points, 15 wins, 5 draws, 14 defeats. I liked what they built last year, and I wasn't sure how they would do under Chris Armas, and I thought that might hold them back. But then they started so well, and much like the Whitecaps, kind of dropped, ended up finishing 7th when they probably felt for a lot of the year that they could easily have been top 4. We've already seen them in competitive action in the 2-1 win, maybe surprising 2-1 win over LAFC in a bitter, cold Commerce City on Tuesday night, -14, which seemed warm compared to the next night's game in Kansas City, but like crazy conditions. Now, they've brought 7 players in, and they've let a lot of players go. If you look at the players that's gone, though, there's not really anyone that you look at that and you think, they'll really miss them. But the players coming in, it's a couple of interesting ones. Josh Atencio, 6 seasons with the Sounders, had come through the Colorado system and was a homegrown. Ku Di Pietro from DC United, Ali Fadal coming in from Valencia's B team, and Ian Murphy coming in from FC Cincinnati, along with Chidozie Awaziam. So they've strengthened defensively and in the middle of the park, but I don't know what to expect from them this year. I see them slipping a bit this year.
I agree. I feel like one of the things that Colorado had really going for them at the beginning of last season, where they looked so good, was their defense. And a big part of that was Moise Bombito, which obviously Canadian fans will be very aware of. Since they lost him, they started to have those dips. But it wasn't even just defensively. It was also offensively as well. They weren't scoring as much as it did at the beginning. And even though they did have a pretty decent goal score record, it still didn't feel like they had that much punch in it. It was basically like Jordi Mihailovic doing his best to carry the team on the offensive side. And I don't really know if, the additions that they have, the only 4 they brought in was on the super draft. I don't really know if they'll be able to improve upon that. Now, in the midfield, I do really like the additions, especially of Atencio, who I always rated when he was in Seattle, and Ku Di Pietro, who was, a hot prospect at DC. Broke through when Wayne Rooney was still in charge and got some really important goals there and looked like to be a good upcoming star. I feel like he still has that sort of potential, and maybe with Colorado, if he can link up with Mihailovic, might be a nice little duo in the midfield. But yeah, sort of defensively, he's pretty, like, from the little I saw from him from Cincinnati, pretty decent defender. Can he fill the gap that Moise Bombito had? I'm not so sure. I think overall for Colorado, I'm feeling like they're going to be around the same, maybe a little bit worse for 2025.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking as well. There's a big batch of teams, I think, that are fighting for like 7th to 12th. And I think Colorado's right in there for me. An interesting one next, Dallas. Stunning turnover of the team. New head coach as well, Eric Quill, had been before with their second team. Went to manage New Mexico, has come back now as the head coach. So maybe not a big name or a sexy name for the Dallas fans, but he's building his team, he's building his squad. 17 players coming in, 18 players moving out. And Like you look at some of the players that had their options declined, like Liam Fraser, Omer Gonzalez, Jimmy Maurer. So it's players that you know, that it's players that have been in the league for a while. And then trading two big pieces to Seattle in Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola, a couple of American internationals. And we'll talk more about them when we get to Seattle in the next part. But that's two big pieces that's moved on, as well as Nkosi Tafari that was traded to LAFC, Alan Velasco heading off to Boca Juniors as well. So some big pieces going out there.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely don't think we'll be able to recognize this FC Dallas side next season when you compare it to the FC Dallas sides that you've been accustomed to the last season or two because of all of the players that went out. Like the stars that you mentioned, Ferreira, Ariola, you had Tafari, Velasco's a huge one, though that one was sort of written in the sand for a while. Anis Sally, another player that they loaned out, like a lot of players all across the pitch. Asier Yaramendi wasn't the player that he used to be, but still, like a lot of the big name players that they had have left, and now the players that they've brought in, it feels like this is going to be a completely new squad for the new man, for Quill, and hopefully for him, the fact that he swung big and he said, basically, get this team out. I want an entirely new team. These are the guys that he feels will be able to play the way he wants to play, especially considering that he has basically an MVP in Lucio Acosta, which is one of the biggest moves of the offseason period. Biggest thing with Dallas was they were leaking goals left, right, and center. Do they have the defensive power now to be able to contend with that? Because Lucho's going to create goals and he's going to score goals, but if you can't defend your goal, it's not really going to matter. So that's going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking out for in Dallas, is more of their defensive side, because they brought in players that are sort of defensive, but either ones that I'm not really that aware of, or like you have a player like Shaq Moore who is a defender, but he's more of an attacking defender rather than like a traditional stay back defender, and like Abubakar and the like. It's there's so many question marks around Dallas right now, and while Lucho Costa is fantastic and some of the other players that they brought in, I really am going to look at, can they gel together as a team, and can they be solid defensively?
When 17 brought in, 6 of those though were homegrowns. One is an MLS Next Pro promotion and one's a draft pick. So like 8 of the 17 are young guys. So you're looking at guys like Anderson Julio from RSL, and you mentioned Shaq Moore in defence there from Nashville. One of the things that they got back from Seattle for the 2 guys going out was Leo Chu, who I've always liked. I think he did well with Seattle. I think he'll do well in Dallas, and playing alongside Acosta's great. Acosta, I mean, there's been a couple of big statement transfers in MLS this off-season, and I think Dallas did that by bringing in Acosta. He's not somebody that is going to come back and help you out a lot defensively. And as you say, that's really where they need a bit of help. Some of the other players they've brought in, like Alvaro Augusto from Portimonense, I have no idea anything about him. So until we kind of see a few games from them, it's maybe going to be tough to know. When you've got that much turnover, though, it kind of feels like a new team. It's almost an expansion team. They've almost got as many new players as San Diego. So, I mean, they were 11th last year. They missed the playoffs by 6 points, 11 wins, 8 draws, 15 defeats. This is one I have no idea. They'll be somewhere in this 8th to 12th bunch of teams, I think. But you'd be a brave person, I think, at this point to be really confident as to where they're going to finish.
Yeah, I think the safest bet is where you said, right in the middle, in that kind of last few places, maybe wild card scrap, trying to say worse or better. Yeah, I feel like you don't really have much to go off of to make that kind of strong claim.
But one Texan team doing some big business. The other Texan team that we haven't mentioned yet, Houston, 5th in 2024, bounced in the first round of the playoffs in 2 games by Seattle. 54 points on the year, 15 wins, 9 draws, 10 losses, putting up numbers that I think we felt Vancouver could have done, or Vancouver could have improved upon. And it's like they were a team that were sitting where Vancouver maybe should have been come the end of the year. Now, they've got 14 players that have moved out. A lot of options declined. Some well-known names in there as well. Jan Gregus, Hector Herrero, Brad Smith, Latif Blessing, Steve Clark. Coco Carrasquilla, a player that I've always really liked, and there was a time Houston had so many players that I'd have loved to have seen here in Vancouver, and Carrasquilla was one of them. He's gone to Pumas now. Sebastian Ferreira had a mutual contract termination. So those are the ones that's gone. So a lot of experience gone. And from the 8 players that's come in, they've got a couple of really big ones. So Jack McGlynn, traded from Philadelphia Union, 2.1 million guaranteed, 1.3 million conditional, sell-on percentage as well. It was the second cash for trade deal under the new MLS rules. He's coming in as an under-22 initiative player, and I liked what I saw from him at Philly. So right away that bolsters the midfield. And then beside him, he's maybe getting on a bit now, but Nicolas Ladero, free agent, 1 goal, 11 assists last year with Orlando, 8 seasons before that with Seattle, where he won 2 MLS Cups, 58 goals, 62 assists. The kind of midfielder I would love here with the Whitecaps. And that is 2 big pieces that they've gone out and added.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show how much Houston have been able to work on bringing in the players that they needed. Especially when you lose a player like Coco Carrasquilla, you need to bring in someone else that can sort of fill that gap. You can't always go for like replacement, but what I like is that they chose a more attacking player and a more defensive midfield player to kind of make up Coco in the differential. And I think Jack McGlynn, he's very young, U22 initiative, 21 years old. We saw what he was able to do with Philadelphia. I've always liked the way that he's been able to play. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum a very experienced player like Nico Lodeiro, who I really liked when he was with Seattle. He was always a player that could do special things. Having them both in the team is going to be helpful, and especially when you lose Hector Herrera and Coco Carrasquilla, you need players that can maybe not, again, it's really hard to like for like replace them, but to be able to bring still 2 midfield players that can be difference makers. Now, given that, do I think that they're going to be able to be as strong as they were last season? Not necessarily. I feel like there might be a little bit of a dip given the way that these transfers have gone. I don't know if they have done enough in my eyes to kind of keep pace with some of the other teams that have strengthened in the West so far this offseason. So I do think they'll be probably going down the table a bit. I don't think they'll tumble as hard as like I've been seeing. Some people have been putting Houston in like 13th, 14th position. I don't know if it'll go that bad, but I just don't know if it'll be as they'll be as strong even defensively as they were last season. Especially now that there's the report from Tom Bogert that there's one of their top center backs, Mikael, is going to be going to Brazil, to Palmeiras.
Oh, I never saw that one. I mean, defensively is where they were strong last year. They had the second best defensive record in the West, just behind Seattle. But they also weren't scoring goals. So it was like grinding out like narrow victories, keeping clean sheets along the way. They only scored 47 goals. The only team that scored less, or teams that scored less than them last year in the West, were Austin and San Jose. And we know how bad San Jose were. So they need to find goals from somewhere to keep up. And I think it will be a struggle. I agree. I don't see them dropping as much as some of the folk are thinking that they are going to drop. And it's can they use what's been traditionally a strong home fortress to their advantage once again? I mean, I like what they've brought in, but I mean, you've got like McGlynn, you're going to think they're going to lose him maybe in the summer for Gold Cup, and Ladero is getting on a bit. Can he still produce? I think he probably can. But it's another interesting team that I think it'll be a good couple of months so we really know what we're looking at with Houston.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, it'll really come down to that sort of home form, because everyone knows how tough it is for anybody to be able to go to Houston and get a result. But I think it might take a little bit of time to see how these two new midfielders kind of gel, and if they can have the same impact that Coco and Hector did for Houston. And then, yeah, if they can score the goals, then they'll be in a good spot. I just don't see them being able to do that, at least right now.
Yeah, it's getting that chemistry, and there's a few teams as well that need to find that chemistry right now. So 3 teams to look at for the rest of this part. Next to the 2 big guns from LA, starting with last year's Western Conference champions over the regular season, LAFC. So they conquered the Caps in the playoffs. The Caps pushed them all the way before Seattle stunned them in the conference semi-final. They topped the regular season with 64 points, 19 wins, 7 draws, 8 defeats. Stung, I'm sure, by the Galaxy, though, winning the MLS Cup. You don't want your cross-city rivals to win anything, but to win the whole thing, they definitely don't want to see. So right now, 15 players have moved on, and some interesting ones as well. Mateus Bogusz, who had been linked with Celtic last year, but he's now gone to Mexico to Cruz Azul instead. Christian Olivero transferred to Gremio. You look at some of the other ones that's moved on. Thomas Angel to San Diego. Carlos Vela's finally hung up his boots, or has he? Will they bring him back? Eli Sanchez that we talked about, he was out of contract and let go. Kai Kamara, he's gone as well. Edward Atuesta, his loan expired. So some interesting players moved on, but not really, apart from maybe Bogusz and Oliveira, not really big hitters moving on. But you look at who they've brought in, and they've got a guy, free agent, that I think a lot of clubs would just have liked to have as a backup. He's like the guy to replace Kai Kamara, maybe even get more minutes than Kai, and Jeremy Ebobisse. They've got Igor Jesus that's come in as an under-22 player from Estrela da Amadora, that I may have butchered. Mark Delgado coming in from LA Galaxy, a cross-city trade. They paid $400,000 in GAM for him. And Artem Smolyakov transferred in from Policia Zhytomyr in the Ukrainian league. A left-back coming in as an under-22 initiative player, rumoured to be for a $2 million or €2 million fee. And then just today, LAFC announced that they'd acquired Turkish attacker Cengiz Ünder as a designated player on loan from Super League club Fenerbahce, but only through to June 30th, with an option to purchase, I guess, seeing how he does, or maybe he doesn't settle, or maybe they've got someone else lined up. But that is weird to bring a DP in just until June. But it looks like they mean business. They've brought some big pieces in there.
Yeah, and I think what's super interesting, I mean, I'll talk about the ones first that you mentioned earlier. I think Ebobisse as a replacement for Kai Kamara is a great piece of business. I think Ebobisse didn't obviously have a great season last season, because who did on that team?
Yes.
But I still think, like, from what I've seen from him, especially in the games against the Whitecaps, he's always looked dangerous. He's a good physical striker that's, I think, when you need a goal late on, you can throw him on and he can probably get it for you. He can, or at least help out. Marky Delgado, I still don't understand how they managed to pull that off from LA Galaxy, especially for 400K GAM. I know he's not necessarily the same player that he was, previously, but I mean, what he showed with the Galaxy, he's still quality. I mean, that midfield of, Brugman, Marky Delgado, and Ricky Puig. I mean, that was an all-star midfield there, and I'll be interested to see how he does without those two, because I feel like with LA Galaxy, it's always been like Marky Delgado in the same breath as Gaston Brugman and as Ricky Puig. And when we talk about Galaxy, we'll talk about what that might mean for the Galaxy as well. But so far, I mean, like those are some pretty good signings. Don't know much about Igor Jesus or Smolyakov, the Ukrainian. I think I read that Smolyakov is like a rising star in Ukraine, so it might be somebody that could break through in the starting 11. But the Cengiz Under one is very, very surprising for me that they actually got done, because I don't know if you heard about the supporters group protest that LAFC had, because apparently LA is one of the top cities for Armenian diaspora, and their LAFC have a big supporters group that are made up of Armenians, and they released a statement saying that they wouldn't want LAFC to sign Cengiz Under because of political reasons of the tensions between Armenia and Turkey. I haven't done much research into why there are those political things. I just read that and said, that's kind of weird. But they said that because they make such a big part of LA and because they feel like they're such a big part of the club, they were basically demanding that they don't sign Cengiz Under. And now today, they just announced that they signed Cengiz Under. And so I don't know what that's going to mean for the supporters and for, LAFC. LA, we know how LA supporters groups are. When they start a fuss, they can make things happen. So I'm curious to see what the fallout of this is going to be, because they seemed pretty serious in that kind of open letter that they posted on their social.
I mean, that's a shame for Under as well, because it's like the political side's got nothing to do with him, and he just wants to come and play football. And I mean, clearly LAFC think highly of him to bring him in. Maybe that is also part of the reason that they've only got him to June then, just to see how all this plays out. I mean, I'm thinking it was just to see if he settles, but maybe it's like, well, let's just see the lie of the land with all this in the background. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, especially since they had an Armenian Heritage Night before LAFC.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they've had Heritage Nights for Armenians, because there's so many Armenians in LA. And then
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'm looking here. The team is called Los Armenios, so like a Spanish way of saying the Armenians. And they released a whole statement and everything. So it's gonna be not so pretty, I think, there when things boil over.
Yeah, I wonder how the player feels as well, because he must be like, "What am I coming into here?"
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you have to see LAFC strong again. I mean, if they weren't top three, it would be stunning. First, second, perhaps, but we'll get into our top three at the end. But I mean, they're going to be there or thereabout over the regular season. It's do they do it in the playoffs? Can they go all the way? I mean, they're a team that you feel if they need to go out and add, they'll go out and add, and they always make it seem to work within the cap.
Yeah, that's a luxury that I feel like some of us over here on this side of the border wish, or even on this side of the country, wish we could have. But yeah, the way that they managed to get all these players and still fit within the cap, you can only wish.
Well, their cross-city rivals have always been good at making players fit within the cap as well. So the Galaxy won the MLS Cup last year. They finished second in the West in the regular season, just on goal difference by 1 goal in that dramatic end of season decision day that went back and forth. 19 wins, 7 draws, 8 losses. They only lost once at home, so it's a fortress down there in Carson. Unsurprisingly, a smallish turnover. Only 6 players moving on, and you look at them, and Marky Delgado that we talked about going to LAFC is obviously a big one. Dejan Joveljic. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about him in the next part when we look at Sporting Kansas City, but that was a surprising piece that they let go, I think.
Yeah, especially considering the way that he kind of came in clutch for them many times before. I know everybody was focused on the Paintsill and Gabriel Peck show that they had going on throughout the season, but I still felt like Dejan Jovelic was a good player for them, an important player for them, and the fact that they kind of let him go to SKC and it didn't seem like they kicked up much of a fuss for him leaving was a bit surprising. I thought if he was going to leave, it'd be somewhere to Europe, not Interleague. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. And you look at maybe who they replaced him with. Maybe they'll be confident that they can get the same numbers from Christian Ramirez who came in. But overall, I was a little bit of that's one of the more shocking transfers that I saw in this offseason is seeing Dejan leave LA Galaxy for SKC.
Well, I mean, they got such a good return on him, and then they've brought in Ramirez, which in MLS terms, it's a bit of a bargain. 250 in 2025 GAM, 250 in conditional 2026 GAM coming in from Columbus. So, I mean, the pressure's certainly on him to perform right away, and he's done well at Columbus over the years. They've brought in a couple of under-22 initiative players as well. Midfielder Lucas Sanabria, coming in from Club Nacional, Uruguayan, and forward Matias Nascimento on loan from Botafogo, 20-year-old Brazilian. I don't know anything about either of them. I'm not sure if you can fill us in a little bit.
Not the foggiest. All I'm going to say is that the last time they brought in somebody unknown, Brazilian forward from Brazil, his name was Gabriel Peck, and we learned what he was about very, very quickly. So maybe Nascimento will be this year's Gabriel Peck for LA Galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see what they can do. Obviously, they think highly to bring them in and give them under-22 initiative players. Last thing I want to mention on the Galaxy is the bizarre case of Sean Davis. Traded from Nashville on the 19th of December, a 10-season veteran, but then let go just a couple of days ago because they couldn't fit him into the cap.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate for the player because it's such like a clerical oversight from the higher office that for them it'll just be like, oh, we just need to cut this guy. But for him, it's like he came all this way. He probably had to move like family and everything, and then just immediately after says, "Oh, sorry, we couldn't fit you in. We're gonna cut you, and now you got to go look somewhere else for your livelihood." It's the dark side, I think, of salary cap soccer and salary cap sports in North America, where it's just like, oh, you don't fit into the budget, so see you later, and there's nothing you can really do about it, and super, super unfortunate for him, and LA Galaxy, as we mentioned, they're usually a really good team to be able to find financial ways to fit everybody in the team, especially the stars that they are able to bring in. The fact that he was let go like that, it kind of leaves a bitter taste. And I mean, for LA Galaxy in general, I know looking at some of the fan reactions, they're a little bit concerned about some of the outgoings because it's not only Jovelic and the way that Sean Davis got let go, but you look at the fact that they let Jalen Neal go to CF Montreal, who is like this big, their top prospect, their top young prospect in defense, just let him go to Montreal on the East Coast, and sort of questions asked about that. Gaston Brugman leaving alongside Marky Delgado. It's like, I'm not saying LA Galaxy are going to be in any sort of trouble, but it's still kind of like the way that they have let players go does kind of raise some eyebrows, especially from outside of the kind of sphere.
Yeah, the only thing I can think about with Davis is they signed him, and then they've had the chance now to bring in these two under-22 guys, and they're like, well, we need our money for this. They're better than him. They're going to produce more. So he's the guy that has to make way. Now, he's a veteran. I mean, the Whitecaps could do with bolstering the midfield. The only thing about him is he doesn't really produce goals-wise. Whereas I'm looking for someone to replace Stuart Armstrong who would have given you those goals and those assists. But, I mean, he'll find somewhere. But salary and stuff's going to come into it now. So it's a real shame for him. It's just a bizarre circumstance. When I was putting all these comings and goings together, it's like, this is just weird. So
hopefully he'll have his mom to his mom's money from YouTube and TikTok to to help soothe the pain from it.
Oh, what does his mum do?
His mom is her name's Linja, and she's a super popular TikTok and like YouTube short celebrity chef. She has like 13.7 million subscribers.
I did not
across
know
both
that.
platforms.
We should bring him here then, just get all that publicity as well.
Yeah, and get some good food out of it too.
Ooh. Last team we'll look at in this part, Minnesota. 6th in the West after a good late run last season. Lost to the Galaxy in the Western semi-finals. 52 points, 15 wins, 7 draws, 12 defeats. 13 players making way. And again, you look at them and it's not players that you're like, well, that's going to be a huge loss to them. Maybe Franco Fragapane, he didn't have the best season. Timu Pukki, who didn't quite light it up in MLS the way he did at Norwich. He's gone back to Finland, to Helsinki. So I don't think there's huge losses there. But they've only brought 4 players in so far, which is quite baffling to me. And you look at who they have brought in, though, and they've paid money. Defender, Argentine centre-back, Nicolas Romero, under-22 player, $2 million fee coming in from Atletico Tucumán. Midfielder Ho-Yeon Young, transferred in from Gwangju FC. 24-year-old Korean midfielder, $1 million fee rumoured for him. He's had 1 cap for the South Korean national team. And another midfielder, Owen Jean, young player. Amiens, 21-year-old midfielder, and $2 million is the reported fee that they've paid for them. So they've spent money to bring 3 big pieces in, but it seems that the turnover going out compared to coming in, they need to add some depth pieces and quick.
Yeah, because I feel like Minnesota they finished 6th in the West, but I thought they had one of the most impressive sides in all of the West.
They were
Especially,
fun to watch.
Yeah, they were great to watch, and it wasn't only just because of Tanny Oluwase that obviously everybody tuned into because he was Canadian, but just in general, they were a fun team to watch. The way that they attacked, the way that they played, ever since Adrian Heath left, and now we have this sort of new era of Minnesota. I'm enjoying what I see, and yes, a lot of these players, they have let a lot of players go, and like you said, Fragapane, you could say Miguel Tapias, obviously Timo Pukki and everything, but those are players that I don't think were crucial to Minnesota in the way that they played last season. Obviously, they're going to have to replace them with some people. They need more bodies because especially with the way the MLS works, how many games you play, you need depth. But I don't know much about the players that they brought in, but if they're good quality players that can add to what Minnesota already have, I still feel pretty confident that Minnesota will be in and around where they finished last season and will be comfortably in the playoff places. They just need to add a couple more pieces.
I see them challenging for top 4, maybe 4th. I think they can definitely finish higher than they did last year. They do need to bring in some more players, and they play a good brand of football. I do enjoy watching their games. It's a great atmosphere there as well, and hopefully Dane Sinclair as well has a good season for them. But it's a team that the Whitecaps need to look at finishing above, really, if they want to have a strong season. Right now, I don't know that I see that, but I think it'll be a good year for Minnesota.
Yeah. Especially since they have, for me, one of the players with the best names in MLS that they brought in the re-entry draft, Kip Keller.
Yes.
That sounds like straight out of the 90s Attitude Era WWE wrestler named Kip Keller.
It sounds like a Stan Lee comic book character because he always went for the alliteration.
He did, yeah. Just a great name. Great name overall.
It is. So that's the first 7 teams in the West that we've looked at. We'll be back looking at the other 7 after this episode's Britpop song.
Hi, I'm Maxim Kirpov, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
I have seen the Starship Enterprise.
welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, it's our Britpop song for this episode. If you're a new listener, we're paying tribute to 30 years of Britpop. End of last year, into this year, we'll be playing at least one Britpop song every episode. This is a song that was released on February 13th, 1995, charting this week. 30 years ago, it was from an English band called Smash. We've played them before, and this is from a 7-track EP called Another Love, and that was the title track, Another Love, which you can also find on their debut album. And there's a lot to love in the MLS West this season. We've got 7 teams down in our preview, 7 more to come in this part, including the Whitecaps' Cascadian rivals, and we'll kick off this part with one of them, the team the Whitecaps will be kicking off their season with on Sunday down in Oregon. Portland Timbers, 9th last year, 47 points, 12 wins, 11 draws, 11 defeats. The second high scorers with 65 goals. Defensively shaky, as we all saw in the playoffs as the Whitecaps went down there and absolutely dismantled them in the play-in game. Not a lot of movement for Phil Neville, which is kind of interesting because of some of the comments that he made today in his kind of pre-game press conference that he had. 6 players going out, 6 players coming in. And, I mean, there's only one player to talk about going out, Felipe. Midfielder, Evander, traded to FC Cincinnati in a bumper $12 million deal, plus 150,000 conditional if different things were met. Portland will also retain a sell-on percentage for him, because I think a lot of folk expected Evander to go overseas. And Phil Neville and Ned Grabavoy revealed today that there was interest from a number of clubs, including Mexican teams, but it was Cincinnati who came up with the big bucks. And it was the ability to have some of that as cash and to turn some of that into GAM to give them a lot more flexibility that made them go to keep him in MLS. And he's in a different conference, so he might not come back to hurt them too much. 34 goal contributions last year. 15 goals, 19 assists. He was an amazing player. And huge loss for the Timbers.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about how they were the second highest scorers in Western Conference. You look at the goals they scored, you look at the goal contributions he had, it was more than half. More than half of the goal contributions came from one player only. And take that player out, and now that's a completely different Portland team. It's the same thing, I think, that if you were to take out, Ryan Gauld from the Whitecaps, it's a different team that you're looking at altogether. And I do know, obviously, they brought in somebody to replace him with, but I mean, Evander, he was such a good player, such a fun player to watch last season. I hated watching him get the ball whenever they were facing the Caps and everything.
Yeah, to be fair, he did not show up for the playoff game, but then none of them did.
No, exactly. No one really came out to bat in that playoff game. We all know what happened after that playoff game between him and the club that made it very, very, very untenable, the situation between them. So it was bound to happen. But the fact that he went to not a direct rival, but still within the MLS, will still probably be a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of the Portland fans. I mean, if you're FC Cincinnati, you lose Lucho Acosta, guess who you bring in? Evander. I mean, that's such a luxurious purchase of
it's like stuff you dream of here.
Yeah, it's like exactly. It's as if you lost, Ryan Gauld and you brought in somebody like Evander. You're like, okay, like it's still sad, but it's still quality for quality. And
I'm curious to see how, now that we've got cash transfers in the league, how this will play out down the line. Because right now it's a lot of it's like between East and West. But say Seattle or LA were like, we want Evander. and we're going to give you 15, 20 million for him. That's hard for Portland to turn down, but you're giving your best player to a conference rival.
Yeah, and I think that will happen. Not necessarily with Evander, but I
No,
think with
but
a lot of other stars, this kind of cash trade, why like I'm so excited for it is because it's going to make it feel like it is in European football, where you get an up and coming star, and a direct rival can just poach him for him because they just throw money at it.
yeah,
At
which
the
is good
club.
and bad. Like someone realistically could come in and say to the Whitecaps, "We'll give you 15 million for Ryan Gold."
And they take, and I think as tough as it is, as important as a player as he is, and everything he's done for the club, I think they wouldn't say no at all. I think they wouldn't think twice. 15 million, like what you can reinvest into the squad, it's a lot of money, especially in the MLS. That's a lot of money. So I feel like we're gonna see it a lot more. But for Portland, I genuinely don't think that it's going to be a good year for
No,
them.
I think they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I don't see Phil Neville making it past the summer.
No, I agree. I don't think they've done enough at all to this offseason since like it was written in the sand since November that Evander was leaving, and it doesn't really feel like they've done much at all to kind of
Well, no, like if you look at the 6 players they brought in, so Ariel Lassiter, he's been around the league, not somebody you'd be like, oh, I want Ariel Lassiter on my team. They've got Ecuadorian midfielder João Ortiz coming in from Independiente de Val. I don't know much about him. Kevin Kelsey, another KK, coming in from Shakhtar Donetsk because a forward, a super draft pick, and then a Colombian for you from Medellin, Jimir Fori. Can you tell us anything about him? 22 years old, defender.
I can't tell anything about him, but it's Medellin. It's not Medellin.
Ah,
but
it's pronounced it Medellin. There we go.
There you go. Now you know. That's why I'm here to help you out
Exactly.
with those tricky Spanish names. But yeah, and obviously David da Costa, the star player that they brought in to replace Evander
Yes.
from Lens. That is a player that I actually do know a little bit about because the soccer nerd that I am, Lens were actually a really good team in France, like a couple years ago, where they were like pushing PSG, and he was part of that squad. Didn't really do all that much compared to some other players. I haven't seen enough of him personally to think, oh, he's a quality player. He is similar to Evander, that he's kind of like good on the ball. He's tricky. He's got good dribbling, and he can create chances. But I don't know if he can do it at the same consistent rate as Evander was. I don't think he's a game changer. He is someone that can add flair, but I don't think he's someone that can take the game by the scruff of the neck and win it for you, as Evander did for Portland last season, which is why I think that, well, he will be good and he might get like 15 goal contributions, maybe 20. He won't be anywhere near as productive as Evander, I think.
He's got to get chemistry with the team as well. And he seems a nice enough lad from the press conference I had today. He speaks 10 languages. But
What?
English is not that strong as one of the
Oof.
languages.
You would think that would be higher up, but man,
I know, because they introduced me and said, oh, he speaks 10 languages. English isn't one of his best ones. It's like, oh, this will be an interesting press conference then. They've also got Tommy McNamara is training with them. One of the media had asked about him there. So they're going to make a decision on him by the end of next week. So that's a veteran coming to possibly in the team. Now, Neville said it's going to be a different team this year. They're going to have a new identity, a new style of play. He said last year they were a good team of individuals, but they weren't a good team as a collective. And he said he admits they could score a lot, but he knew they conceded a lot and they've had to work on set pieces. And he just feels that the last game from last year needs to be the motivating factor for them going into this season. But I think they're going to struggle.
Yeah. I just don't see enough in the team for me to feel any kind of confidence. And it's not the Whitecap bias at all. It's just I don't see them being able to perform to the level that they did with Evander, the team. Because even when Evander wasn't playing, because he didn't play every single game for Portland, and the games that he wasn't playing, they looked nothing like they did with him. He was that important for Portland. So without him and without a game changer like him in the team, yeah, if I would be surprised if Portland make the playoffs this season.
Yeah. A team that really punched above their weight last year was RSL, finishing third, 59 points, 16 wins, 11 draws, just 7 defeats in the end. They were the joint second highest scorers, but bounced out to Minnesota in the first round of the playoffs. Now, it's a team that always seems to surprise me. I have them low down, they go high. I think it would be a huge surprise if they can replicate finishing third this year round, but it's another team with a lot of turnover. 17 players have departed, with a key one being Chicho Arango, traded to San Jose, 1.4 million in GAM, which is going to get divided over the next couple of seasons. 17 goals and 12 assists for RSL last year. And I think with him going, RSL's top 4 hopes are probably gone with that.
Yep, because now they pretty much have to solely rely on Andres Gomez. Oh no, he left. Not even him. They don't have anybody. They have because they lost also Anderson Julio, who was their third top scorer. So all of their top 3 goal scorers have left from last season, and even Rubio Rubin, who wasn't that fantastic, but still was at least a player that had been a good goal scorer in the league before, are all out. And I know, you look at the players that they've brought in, and
like 13 in, 4 are homegrowns and 2 are goalkeepers.
Yeah, I don't really see where the goals
Actually,
are
3 are
coming from.
goalkeepers. Wow.
Yeah. So unless these goalkeepers are like Chivo Loret and can score a bunch of goals from free kicks and set pieces, I don't know where the goals are going to be coming from for RSL.
I mean, you're looking at who they've brought in, and it's like there's no one really jumping out at you. They've brought a guy in from the A-League from MacArthur, Ariath Piol, who I've watched a bit of. There's better forwards in the A-League than him, so I mean he's decent enough, but yeah, I think this is a tough one for RSL this year.
Yeah. I would be once again very surprised if they kind of maybe they will make the playoffs, but I definitely don't think they'll be top 4 or even top 6.
No. And we'll note again, we're recording this on the evening of the 20th of February. So a lot still can happen in the 2 months before the window shuts. And RSL look like a team that need to get some things happening. A team, though, that came out very early to get things done were San Jose, rock bottom last year. 10 points adrift of the team above them, never mind the playoff line, in which they were 26 points back off. 21 points in total from 6 wins, 3 draws, 25 defeats. They were the second lowest scorers with 41 goals. Austin were the worst. Worst defence, 78. To put that in context for Whitecaps fans, the Whitecaps conceded 49. That's like massive difference. New head coach, Bruce Arena, the old grumpy veteran, and making his mark already by bringing in 10 new players, 5 of them from New England Revolution.
He clearly had a favourite.
Yeah, he's putting the band back together. 14 players leaving. And you look at the ones that's moved on, and there's some well-known names. Tommy Thompson, who's been there since he broke into the team as a homegrown. Jeremy Ibobisi, as we talked about, he didn't have a great season. Michael Baldissimo, former Whitecaps, moving on as well. So the players that's come in, and I want to just, I was going to say, I just wanted to look at 3, but I mean, it's tough because I mentioned there's 5 New England Rev players. 4 come in as trades. Goalkeeper Errol Edwards, defender Dave Romney, midfielder Ian Harkes, and Canadian midfielder Mark Anthony Kay. They also added a free agent who had been with the Revs last year in Nick Lima, coming home to San Jose after time there and with Austin. He was a player that when Mark DeSantis was here, Mark was so high on Nick Lima and said he was a defender he would love to add if he could. So that's a quintet coming in from New England, which you'll have the familiarity with the coach and playing style, but New England not exactly a team that if you're going to go and raid one team, that's the team that instantly springs to mind.
No, and I get it. You want to bring the players that, you did so well with back, especially on their new team, to try to rekindle that magic and everything. But, the past isn't the past for a reason. I always feel like when you try to do that, very rarely does it actually work. And like Ian Harkes was a quality player a few years ago. Now is he at that same level? I don't think so. Same could be said with Mark Anthony Kaye. I really liked him a few years ago, around the pandemic era and post-pandemic era a little bit, but is he the same player? No. So I feel like these are kind of like feel-good things, and I'm sure a lot of, New England fans will be looking fondly on this and remembering the heydays and everything. But I don't think that it's like actually going to be productive for San Jose on that front, but they have made productive moves.
Yeah, the other end of the pitch looks exciting. You've got Joseph Martinez, 31-year-old, so still got a lot left in the tank, the Venezuelan. 13 goals he got with Montreal last year, coming to San Jose as a free agent. Like, he scores wherever he is. It's a great addition on his own. But who have you got up front now with him? Chicho Arango, coming in from RSL, as we mentioned, for what seems like a bargain, really. I mentioned that about Delgado earlier, but this as well is a bargain. A lot more money than Delgado. 700,000 in GAM this year, 700,000 in GAM next year with an international spot. He's going to be a DP. Christian Espinosa is their other DP. That's like Arango, Martinez, Espinosa. That's quality.
Yeah, that's a stellar front three. I mean, Espinosa is a very good player. We've seen what he can do on his day. He's a very good creative player as well, and having two absolutely proven goal scorers in the league. I mean, Josef Martinez, it's not, 2017, 2018 anymore, but still, like the player that he was before, and the player that even still sort of is, like you mentioned, 13 goals with CF Montreal. It's still quite good, and coming back from that major injury that he got a few years ago, it makes it seem like he's sort of coming back, not to his very best, but sort of coming back to form. And then having a player that is in banging form like Chicho Arango, I mean, those two players are going to score you a lot of goals. Espinosa's probably going to get a lot of assists, and he's going to have a lot of fun up top. The biggest thing for San Jose is obviously the defense, because you can score, 4 or 5 goals a game, but if you concede 6 or 7, the result's gonna be the same. So they cannot concede 78 goals again this season unless they plan to score 100 by the end of the 34 games.
I mean, they've got the players to do it, but they've struggled pre-season. Like, they went down. They lost to Red Bulls. That was a narrow defeat, but they shipped 5 goals to Chicago. Now, obviously, you've got players that's coming in and out of the team, but they've not performed the way that I thought, because they also lost to Portland as well. So on paper, it looks like they're a lot stronger, but they're not quite putting it together yet. And I think they'll be a lot better than they were last year. I don't think they'll be bottom, but they've got to keep the ball out the net, as you say. They'll score. It might be the Kevin Keegan Newcastle style team where they're going to win games 4-3. Pre-season hasn't set them up for that. So I think they need to put a little bit into the defence now. If they've any cap space left, they need to strengthen that defence.
For sure. 100%. I feel like, preseason form, you usually take it with a grain of salt because of the rotation, everything that goes into it. But biggest thing for this new look San Jose is gelling, with a lot of the staples that they had before. I mean, you mentioned some of the players that left, but also like Carlos Acapo, Jackson Newell, Carlos Grueso, even like players like William Yarborough. Like these are players that have been in and around San Jose for a while. Having them leave, you kind of have to form a new team around these special players that you brought in the forward line. But just in general, like, how do you function as this sort of new look San Jose side? It might take a little bit of time, so they might not come out of the gates flying. But I do feel like once they start to get things going, they'll be a very good side to play, at least a very entertaining side to watch. I don't think they'll finish bottom, but until they get their defense sorted, I also don't think they're going to finish in the top unless they make some big, shrewd signings in the defensive area.
Well, if we're talking about new teams, let's get to the new team, San Diego. Everyone's new in the San Diego team, and there's a big list of all the players they've brought in. There's a lot of MLS experience in there. They've picked up some nice pieces from around the league. Thomas Angel, for example, from LAFC. You've got your two DPs. You've got Chucky Lozano, who's coming in from PSV Eindhoven. And then you've got Anders Dreyer, who has come in from Anderlecht as a designated player, Danish forward. Near $5 million transfer fee is what's been reported for him. It's tough. You could have a season like St. Louis, or you could just struggle straight out of the blocks. I don't know. This is one team, like, I look at it, it doesn't excite me. I think it could be a struggle, but sometimes you just catch lightning in the bottle like St. Louis did.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impossible position to try to predict an expansion side, because you could have a St. Louis or you could have a Cincinnati. Like, you never know which way things.
That was I knew there was a team that bombed, and I couldn't think who it was. It was Cincinnati.
It was Cincinnati. Yeah,
for quite a few seasons.
For quite a few seasons, they were wooden spoons, and so you never really know what's going to happen with it. But if you look at the squad composition, like you said, there's a lot of MLS experiences, which is good, and a couple of like pretty decent signings from there. Like, I think Andres Reyes is a big signing from then, the Colombian center back from New York Red Bulls. I think that when you look at some of the players that they brought overseas, Paddy McNair, a lot of English fans and fans of the English leagues will recognize him. Alex Maiden maybe a little bit as well from Nottingham Forest. But overall, looking at the squad, just by the names and by the experience, it doesn't really move me. I kind of feel like, compared to some of the other teams, maybe it's just because we're familiar with the other teams, and like you said, this team might just click regardless of the names or the experience that the individual players have. But just based on what we have on the tangible things that we can judge upon, this kind of screams a mid to lower mid table team, kind of maybe scrapping for wildcard place, if not falling out. I'm not going to be confident enough to say they're going to finish bottom, like I've been seeing a lot of pundits and a lot of experts say.
Yeah, well, like, without spoiling what's to come, I look at St. Louis and I'm like, I think everyone's better than St. Louis, including San Diego, so I don't think they're bottom.
No, I don't think they're bottom, but wouldn't be surprised if they're kind of between that like 8th and like 13th kind of spot. I think it's going to be a very, not underwhelming, but not overwhelming, just like a whelming season for San Diego.
I mean, they can always go out and splash some cash maybe as well. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, might hit up Kevin De Bruyne with the fall of Man City. You never know.
Seattle, 4th last year, 16 wins, 9 draws, 9 defeats. They lost to the Galaxy in the Western Conference final, narrowly 1-0, having knocked out LAFC in the semis after extra time. They've not done a lot, but a couple of interesting additions, which we'll come to. But 7 players moving on. We mentioned Leo Chu to Dallas. We've mentioned Josh Atencio to Colorado. The other big one, Raul Ruidiaz, out of contract, moving on. And such a key player from them over the years. A player that at one point, because we've got this running joke in the podcast, who wouldn't want Raul Rui Diaz in your team? Because the Whitecaps got a chance to get him and didn't many years ago. So, yeah, that's their biggest loss, I think. Rui Diaz moving on. But you look at who they've brought in, and they're stronger. They've got the two guys from Dallas that we touched on there as the two big ones. Jesus Ferreira coming in exchange for Leo Chu and up to 2.3 million in GAM, along with an international roster spot and a sell-on percentage. From the GAM, 1.5 million is guaranteed with 800,000 conditional, and they've managed to do that without making Ferreira a DP,
which is incredible business from them. I don't
don't understand how they've done that.
Exactly, especially knowing how MLS rules work with the whole like spreading the transfer fee, heading like how it hits the cap across the each year of the salary, the amortization kind of thing. I don't understand how they've managed to swing that one, but kudos to the front office staff of Seattle, because that is an incredible feat. That's akin to Miami bringing in some of the stars, the Barcelona stars, as non-DP players, that where you're like, there's something fishy going on, but even still, just wow, what a move.
Well, they also did good business with Areola because Dallas are retaining part of his salary budget. So they're taking part of the hit. And it's like, wow. And they only paid 300,000 in GAM for him as well. Well, they gave up their first round draft pick in 2026, but I think everyone knows that's getting less and less value, and you expect Seattle to finish high anyway, so it's going to be a low pick. That's more good business.
Yeah. Both of those were, when those came out and I saw the details of it, I couldn't believe that Seattle got away with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to be stronger. I have them in the top three. Wouldn't even be surprised if they finish first.
I'll be honest, they're probably my pick to finish first, as begrudgingly as it is as a Cascadian rival. I've always thought very highly of Jesus Ferreira. And maybe it's because he's part Colombian, but I've always liked the way that he's played, and having him and Paul Arriola, who also was a player I enjoyed watching from FC Dallas. It's a pairing where you think that it could make the difference from Seattle, especially since none of them covered DP spots, so you still have a lot of like quality in that Seattle team. And like Pedro de la Vega hopefully is only going to get better as the young DP. I think still very highly of him, and so I feel like it's going to be a very, very, very strong team for Seattle this season.
They're so good at holding on to their key guys. Like, actually, one thing I meant to mention when we were talking about Portland, which kind of was mentioned on the call today, is Santiago Moreno is also seemingly maybe on the way out there, which would be they've been trying to offer him a contract that he's going to want to sign, and it doesn't look like it's happening. So, whereas Seattle's keeping all their top guys, Portland's kind of shipping them out. Team that shipped out some real big hitters, Sporting Kansas City, second bottom last year, horrible season. They missed the playoffs by 16 points, only 8 wins, 7 draws, 19 defeats, 9 players in, 3 of them homegrowns, 9 players out. They've lost my boy, Johnny Russell, so they're dead to me now. But the other big one, Alan Pulido, heading off to Chivas, which is a big loss for them because it got them a lot of attention. Whenever I was on any calls, there were so many Mexican journalists on, just wanting to speak about Pulido. So he's gone now, but they've replaced him in a way with Dejan Joveljic, as we touched on, from the Galaxy. $4 million. It was the first cash for player trade in MLS history. The Serbian forward, 21 goals, 6 assists for the Galaxy across all competitions last year. Coming in as a DP, that is a big signing. Added another DP, Manu Garcia, coming in from Greek side Aris Thessaloniki. The Spanish midfielder joining with Russian forward Shapi Suleimanyov from the same Greek side. And that really seems to be their three big pieces that they added. Another forward, Mason Toy as well, who did well when he first came into Montreal and then kind of dipped a little bit. But they've definitely strengthened that side of the pitch. I'm not sure they've strengthened at the back to keep the goals out. And I don't think they've done enough to make them a playoff team.
Yeah, I feel like offensively, Alan Pulido, as much as the Mexican fans might have loved him, he wasn't really a goal scorer for them. I think in the last 5 seasons, he only had one season where he scored 10 goals or more. So I feel like when you bring in that player like Dejan Jovanovic, he's someone that can score goals. Don't really know much about the other two, in Manu Garcia and Suleimanov, but I think attacking wise they look better. But yeah, as you said, like I feel like maybe defensively and defensive midfield and in those areas, they haven't really strengthened enough for me to feel like they'll be, those title contenders. Though a lot of people that I've seen have been speaking highly of them. I saw one report that put them like and predicted 5th in position.
What?
Overall. And I wouldn't go that far, but I don't think they'll be finishing second last though. Maybe
No.
9th, 10th is
Yeah,
a solid shout for
I
them.
don't see them playoffs. They won't be as low, but yeah. Wow. I mean, you look at some of the teams just now, and it does make you feel the Whitecaps roster's not that bad compared to some of these teams.
Yeah.
And if they can just add another strong midfield piece, it's a fairly good roster that is better than a lot of the teams in the West, so that they've got a fighting chance. Because then you look at St. Louis, who are my tips for bottom this year. 12th last year, 10 points off the playoffs, 8 wins, 13 draws, 13 defeats. They've got a new head coach in Olaf Melberg. 5 players out only, but just 2 players coming in for a team that finished 12th. They've obviously got strength in defensively because they let Jake Nerwinski go. So right away, a huge improvement at the back for them.
Don't let Hart catch his
Yeah,
name.
that one's just for her. But all they've brought in is a German centre-back, Timo Baumgartel, and on loan, Norwegian midfielder Konrad Valem from Slavia Prague. Does not scream playoff contenders, and I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I feel like maybe they're sort of resting on the laurels of their mid-season signings that they brought in, that they didn't get to do all that much. The players that they brought in, like Marcel Hartel and Cedric Tucher, they scored 8 goals between them in 10 games. So maybe they're hoping that like that will continue, so they don't need to make that many more signings because they already brought players that can score those goals. Bringing in Timo Baumgartel, who I know from when he played for PSV, and like he had Champions League experience and stuff like that, seems like quite an actual good signing from them defensively. Maybe for them it'll be a case of they already got some good signings from the summer. Now they've added like one good center back to kind of lead that defensive line, and they'll feel like, with the other players that they have there, like Klaus and the like, they'll be in a good enough shape for them to do better than they did last season. I don't think they're going to do that much better, but I think they actually don't have that bad of a shout, and being maybe in the wild card place or just above in the wild card place. And I feel, you look at also Olaf Melberg. I feel like he's a good coach.
I
That
do
can
like
maybe,
him.
yeah, from what I've heard of him and what I've seen from his career, I feel like he is a player that will, or is a coach that can maybe get the best out of some of these players.
Let's round this off with some predictions then. Who's your top 3 in the West?
I think for me, it has to be Seattle first, then it's the 2 LA sides. I feel like just because of Galaxy not having Ricky Puig to start for a while, and Joseph Paintsell is also injured right now, they might not have the hottest of starts, and LAFC, I think, might pip them in that regard. So I'm gonna just edge LAFC second and then LA Galaxy third.
Yeah, I've switched those two. I've got Seattle first and LAFC third, with Galaxy just pipping them to second. But yeah, they do look like the three standout teams that everyone else is trying to catch. I mean, ultimately, it's for positioning for the other teams and then hoping that you do well in the playoffs where anything can happen. What about the Whitecaps? Where do you see them? Are they a playoff team for you?
I don't know. Honestly, I had this conversation with other colleagues before, and it just feels like because Jesper's come in and we've only seen one competitive game from him at the time of recording, but like even from preseason, don't really know what to make of the way that the Whitecaps play, the transfers that they have had. I think Jaden Nelson is a player with a lot of potential. I still believe in what he can bring to the table after what he showed with TFC and why he went to Rosenborg in the first place. Don't really know that much about Sabi, right? And what he could potentially bring. But overall, I feel like, the transfer business hasn't been that bad. The Stuart Armstrong situation, obviously, massive hole. A lot of fans are going to be looking for them to fill that hole. Will they be able to do it before the season starts, or are they going to have to wait till summer again to bring in a player of that quality? Unfortunately, I personally think it's going to be the latter. So, given all that, I would be hard-pressed to think that the Whitecaps will be a playoff side. I hope they will be. But I think if they are, unless, Jesper brings out some next-level football that blindsides all of us, I am expecting Whitecaps to be fighting for the wild card place again, and not in the way that last season we found ourselves there after being such a good squad, throughout the season and deserving to be in the top four. I do feel like that's about the quality and the level that the Whitecaps are at this season.
I think if they can get an Armstrong replacement sooner than later, and like some of the names that's been going about, I'd mentioned in the last show about Tommy Horvat, the Slovenian player. We looked as well at some other players in the off-season, and it's quality names. So if they can get someone in sooner rather than later, I think that will help. It's a tough start to the year. Early points on the board could be crucial, because I do think there's a lot of teams that aren't anything special, and they're all going to be battling for those lower playoff spots. I think the Whitecaps have enough quality to get in, but a couple of the other preview things I've done, I see them between 8th and 12th.
Yep.
And I think they could be anywhere in that right now. I
agree. I think it'll probably be around that. Fighting for the wild card places, I think, is if they finish 8th or 9th, I think that'll be a good season for Jesper this season, considering everything.
I'd take that and then just see what the luck brings in the playoffs. Now, obviously, a lot can change in the coming weeks and months. The transfer window is open until into April, and then we've got the summer one as well. So a lot of these teams that we've talked about will make some moves. Will the Whitecaps? Stay tuned and find out. So that was our preview of the MLS West. We've got one more part of the show to go, and it's a collaboration that I did with SoccerWise, a podcast hosted by Tom Boger and David Gass and Matthew Doyle. So part of the collaboration is they had it on their network. We'll bring it to you here. It's just my Whitecaps season preview with them, and we'll bring you that after a special song to pay tribute to a musical legend.
Hi, I'm Jesper Sorensen, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
This is easy.
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, it's a very special song. It's actually the song that we had as the theme song to the very first episode of the AFTN podcast. From episode 2, it was Sarah Jickling and the Oh Wells' theme song that they composed for us. It wasn't ready in time for the first episode, so we kicked things off with a song that gave AFTN its name, The Jam, Away from the Numbers. That was a live version of it that featured on the Going Underground 7-inch. The original version of the song can be found on the Jam's In the City album, and I like the live version because it's got a bit more bite to it. It's faster and just really kind of captures the Jam sound. The Jam were one of my favourite bands of my youth, and sadly, on Monday, Jam drummer Rick Butler passed away, aged 69, so that was a tribute to Rick, and as mentioned, this song that gives AFTN its name, Away from the Numbers. So for this final part of the podcast, we're going to bring you a special collaboration ahead of the start of the MLS 2025 season. Last week, I joined David Gass on the SoccerWise podcast. If anyone is unaware of that podcast, it's a newish MLS podcast hosted by David Gass, Tom Bogert, and Jordan Angeli, with contributions as well from Matt Doyle. It's kind of the new Extra Time radio podcast. And what they're doing ahead of the MLS season is a series of previews, one for every team. Had the pleasure of joining David and the crew to do the Vancouver Whitecaps one. And it's a collaborative effort. You can see it on the SoccerWise HQ YouTube channel. You can also listen to it in all the usual podcast places for the SoccerWise podcast. So give them a follow and add that to your podcast feed as well. And as part of the collaboration, we're also able to run it on the AFTN Soccer Show itself. So I'm going to bring you that just now, just the chat I had with David Gass this week about the Whitecaps' chances for 2025, the turbulent off-season, the new faces, and a few other things as well.
Vancouver Whitecaps going into what is a massive year. A potential ownership change, a potential stadium change, a new coach. A lot to talk about for what is one of the most stable rosters in Major League Soccer, Tom. 3 months ago, we thought this wasn't really going to be a conversation. It was just, can everyone get a 0.5% better? Can it all be a little more cohesive? And that's all been thrown up in the air.
Yeah, Stuart Armstrong left for Sheffield Wednesday. Feel like it came out of nowhere because he had just gotten here late last year, and it seemed to be that was a foundation to build on. But Stuart Armstrong came to the club and said, hey, I want to go back to England if this opportunity presents itself. It was workable for all parties, so Vancouver didn't want to hold him hostage. Let him go to Sheffield Wednesday, but that throws a bit of a wrinkle into the Vancouver Whitecaps attack. They've brought in some new players. They've gotten younger. Stuart Armstrong was post-prime or late prime, depending on how you view it. So there's some younger attackers, and we thought that this was a team with minimal flexibility, and then they sent out a DP so that they opened up some books a little bit.
It is, I'm putting this out in the world, it is one of the few MLS markets I've never been to. It's one of the few MLS stadiums I've never been to. The lease deal for BC Place for Vancouver expires this year, and they are attempting to sell the team. We don't know where that ownership group will be. We talked about it a lot with Michael McCall of AFTN, one of the longest-running podcasts covering the Vancouver Whitecaps and soccer in Canada. They had Jesse Marsh on recently. They do an awesome job covering the sport, so I highly recommend following them, and we'll talk with Michael in a moment. We talked a little bit about the concerns and worries about finding a ownership group that wants to be in Vancouver, that has the money to be in Vancouver, especially as things change both politically and economically for running a sports team there. And then with the stadium lease coming up. So I have to try and get out there this year. I'm putting it out into the world lightly. I have to get to a Vancouver Whitecaps game at some point because the city looks absolutely gorgeous and the atmosphere bounces. I say it over and over again. When this team's good, when they're competitive, when Ryan Gauld's running downhill, when there's space for Ali Ahmed, like this team is fun. It feels fun to watch from afar, and I want to go do it in person.
I couldn't agree more. And again, Vancouver is a city I haven't been to either. It looks beautiful. Everybody I talk to that either lives in Vancouver or has visited Vancouver, nothing but positive things to say. So, Gus, you and me both. It's a little bit difficult to get all the way up into that corner of our continent, but it is well worth it, and I need to make it happen. No excuses. That's on me.
Yeah, we're going to take I think we'll take the dog sled down from Alaska to try and get over there. Obed Vargas was telling me don't sleep on players from Alaska, so I'm learning a lot about that region now. Let's go into our conversation, though, with Michael about this team and about what 2025 is for the Vancouver Whitecaps. Well, I think you all know this is going to be one of my personal favorite segments. You know I love to talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps. It's one of the few MLS markets I've never been to, one of the few MLS stadiums games I've never been to, and I might be against the clock. We'll talk about it coming up here. Michael McCall with us from AFTN, has been covering the Whitecaps for years. It's one of the best sources for coverage of the sport out of Canada, as well as in the Vancouver area. So if you're listening on SoccerWise here, you can go find them anywhere you find your podcast or go to the website. And if you're listening there, well, welcome to SoccerWise. And we are live twice a week, and we talk MLS and NWSL as much as humanly possible. And Michael, this is going to be a fascinating conversation because there's some great, there's some weird, there's some scary. It is all across the map in this Vancouver Whitecaps offseason.
Yeah, it's not been a quiet offseason. I think turbulent is maybe the best word to describe it. I mean, if you're covering the team like we are, it's been interesting and fun rather than just nothing to talk about. I mean, we've got a 3-hour podcast every week, so we've not been struggling for content.
It is maybe also not what we expected. It felt like coming out of last year, the strength of Vancouver was going to be stability. And that stability has been questioned on the field more than we expected. And then for sure off the field, alluding to the fact that the ownership has announced that they're beginning the process of attempting to sell the club. The lease on BC Place ends in 2025 as well. So there is the potential that the team could play somewhere else in Vancouver. There's the potential that, unfortunately, the team may not play in Vancouver. That's taking up a lot of the oxygen. We want to talk about on the field because there is some really interesting stuff to talk about with this club on the field. But Michael, just give me an idea of sort of the reaction, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what the feeling is in the fan base of what's going on and what could come.
An air of uncertainty is basically what surrounds this team, both on the pitch as well as off it just now. But I mean, off it, the club being up for sale, everyone knows what nearly happened with Columbus. Long-time fans remember what happened with San Jose. I'm an AFC Wimbledon fan, and I have that in the back of my mind as well. It came as a shock. I think a lot of people thought that Greg Kerfoot, who's the majority owner, might put the team up for sale after the World Cup. Because he's at an age now that he's maybe thinking of retiring, and he's wanting to just have family planning, estate planning, and that's basically what this is for. Yeah. But we were always told that Jeff Mallett, who is the second biggest owner involved with Yahoo, part owner of football teams in Europe and San Francisco Giants, he's always come out and said, no, I'm here long term. This is for my family. So this came as a shock. It was announced as well when a bunch of the players were over at Ryan Gauld's wedding. So I'm pretty sure that was an interesting talking point at the wedding reception. But I've spoken to a few players and they try and not think about it. They all feel it is a weird situation. From a fan point of view, I've been here since 2007, so this was before my time. But Vancouver Grizzlies getting moved in the NBA. That has been thrown up so many times on social media and the local media, and that's always at the back of everyone's mind as well. What makes it tougher is the loonie is falling against the US dollar. They're looking for 450 to 500 million American for it. I don't know anyone locally that has that kind of money.
Yeah.
I don't know why somebody would want to spend that money to keep the team in Vancouver, if I'm being brutally honest, when you've got markets in the US that probably are on the outside looking in at the next expansion markets. Phoenix, Detroit, makes total sense to me that they come in and say, well, we want this club and we move it. I would hate it. It makes business sense. Football sense, it doesn't. I think MLS, though, would rather have the expansion fees and the money. So the little pyramid scheme doesn't fall down. The owners need this and it's running out. So everyone mentions Vegas. MLS are going to want Vegas as an expansion team. They want the big bucks to come in from Vegas.
The $700 million expansion fee.
So it's the other markets that I think we have to be worried about. There's rumours Ryan Reynolds might be interested. I think that's more wishful thinking than anything else. I mean, he bought Wrexham at, 20 million or something? You can get promoted in 5-6 years to the Prem. You can't do much in MLS. So I don't see that. There's not a lot of local businessmen that's got that kind of money. So all up in the air. Yeah. There's not even any rumours of anyone that's interested. So that's a dark cloud that hangs over it. You mentioned BC Place. I mean, we've been told they'll renew the lease. They kind of have to. There's nowhere else to play in Vancouver. There are rumours that there could be a new stadium that could be built. We've got a race course here, so they could build a stadium there. That's been rumoured from pre-COVID times, and it all came to nothing. Apparently the mayor's pushing for that now, and if that gets approved, it could be tied in with keeping the team here.
Yeah, that'd be great news, obviously. We talk about it on this show all the time. When there's competitive games, BC Place bounces. Like, it is a fun game, fun place to watch a game from someone from the outside. And to me, that goes back to me beginning watching MLS. I always tell this story that the first 2 weeks of MLS, the streaming package or the MLS Direct Kick was always free. And so I'd go to bars and the late game would be Vancouver. And I can vividly remember just watching games at BC Place and thinking it was the coolest place as Darren Maddox tore things up and beating TFC on opening days and all those types of things. And it has history. Like, it is one of the few clubs in Major League Soccer that has extensive history as you go back in to the NASL days. I think a hope for me externally is a World Cup hosted in Canada, a Canadian men's national team being more successful, a CPL growing, that at some point there's someone who can guide this a little bit and say, we need this to build the sport. And what Kevin Blue has done has been incredible at CSA. It's not really his responsibility, but feels like there are more adults in the room who potentially can help sort of bring this to what would be a correct finish and a correct ending. Unfortunately, that's all stuff we have to talk about. Then we talk about the team, and there's also still turbulence and chaos. Normally, we do the transfer thing first. There are some transfers with this team. They are odd, but the biggest story, even on the soccer side, is non-soccer, because it's Vanni Sartini being let go at the end of the season and being replaced now by Jesper Sorensen, a Danish coach, most recently at Brøndby. The Vanni Sartini stuff, as we've kind of sorted to deal with it, you understand he is a wild, erratic character. The club had at moments wild, erratic runs where you thought they had figured it out and they hadn't. The big conversation was like, the roster is stable, so how are they going to get better? And felt like the feeling internally was, well, we'll get a different coach with different tactics. The roster has no longer remained stable off of that. But Vanni Sartini seems like maybe the biggest name in soccer in Canada or in Vancouver. And for him to be gone is just this massive gap to be left for the team.
From looking in from outside, I get why everyone was quite puzzled by this sacking. I mean, I think it's a pretty even split here in Vancouver. Was it the right decision? Was it not? It's a ballsy move by Axel Schuster, because whoever comes in, if they do not perform better than what Vanni did, It's tough on Jesper Sorensen. Axel Schuster will get a lot of questions. The general feeling at the end of last year, though, was, and I think when Vanni posed this question himself in post-game or post-season availability, right away you're like, he's posing that question. That's not the sensible thing to do. Has he taken the team as far as he can?
Yeah.
Does it need a new voice in there? So when the coach is saying that, Axel Schuster spent 2 weeks, he says, mulling over that and came to the same conclusion. I'll be honest, I love Vanni. I had a great relationship with Vanni. I think it was the right decision.
Yeah.
But they had to get the right replacement. And we don't know yet if Jesper Sorensen will be that. And the reason it was the right decision was they should have been top 4 easy last West. Arguably top 2. They had a 6-week spell where they stunk the place out. All season, they were terrible at home. And nobody knows why. On the road, amazing. And nobody quite knows why either. So the feeling was that they underperformed. They should have done so much better. And when you're not getting stuff out of the team, I mean, you saw that Portland game. That's what that team was capable of. They pushed LAFC all the way in playoffs. That's what that team was capable of. So you need someone that can get that week in, week out. They've brought in Jesper Sorensen, personality-wise, polar opposites from Van Nistelrooy. He's not going to be talking about God. He's not going to be talking about cats, Batman and Robin, socialism, painters, and all these things that Vanny would just go wandering off talking about, just with no inkling of why. Just he wanted to get it out there. He's a thoughtful guy, great experience. Like Brøndby's a good team.
Yeah,
almost took them to the Danish Championship. Under 21 Danish head coach, big grounding coming through Danish teams. Played in Denmark, but has only played and coached in Denmark. So MLS, as we know, intricacies galore, different atmospheres, environments, the travel. It's a big learning curve for him. He seems very open to it. It's a tough start to the season, though, as well. And you don't get off to a good start. The fans are immediately on your back, and it could be a very interesting year.
Let's talk about the transfers because that's made it harder. Stuart Armstrong brought in as designated player last year to run alongside Ryan Gauld, the working man's MVP, the hero of the people at the number 10, the Scottish Messi and all those things in between, was supposed to have this partner. And you talk about that Portland game. I think it was a goal and 2 assists for Stuart Armstrong in that game. Only ended up playing 6 matches for the Vancouver Whitecaps before asking to be sold back to England, which he was in this offseason to Sheffield Wednesday. I believe it was in the end. The other departures, Fafa Pico, Ryan Raposo, and then Diber Caicedo that never really landed. Pico, a really good season last year overall, probably as good as you'd expect from him, but still a borderline piece of the roster. And Ryan Raposo has consistently found some good moments, but never become a starter for this team. So the Stuart Armstrong is the big story. And that was, again, you talk about turbulence, a bit of a shock, Michael. Like we thought it was going to be, this was done in 2024 for 2025. And then all of a sudden, for not the first time, a big time player is asking to leave Vancouver.
Yeah. And we joked about it on our podcast when we were doing our predictions for the year. And I said, Stuart Armstrong's going to ask for a transfer because his family's not going to settle. And I put it out because I was like, I don't want to even put that out there.
Right.
Just get fans upset. It had always been at the back of my mind because what a lot of folk will not know is Stuart Armstrong turned down coming to the Whitecaps before he signed for the Whitecaps. They asked him to come. Axel went and met with him in France where he was on holiday. Stuart said, I've just had a newborn baby. My wife and all this support mechanism is back in England. No, it's not for me. No other deals came his way. Then he took the deal here. Now, as soon as you hear that he's got a newborn baby and all the family's going to be in the UK, we've been here before in Vancouver. And I was like, yeah, I can see issues ahead if the wife doesn't settle. But the wife came over. Apparently they loved it here. Everything was great. But he's always wanted to play back in the Premier League in England. Why he picked Sheffield Wednesday and not Sheffield United, I don't know. But he decided to go with the chance to get into the Premier League. And I believe he's only signed with them to the end of the season. So if they don't make it to the Premier League, he'll try and be with another team that might get into the Premier League. Now, he was offered a deal by Southampton, and he could have been in the Premier League, but it wasn't what he was looking for. So he was looking for more, nothing came. It's a huge loss. But we never really got to see what the real Stuart Armstrong is. Like I've known him as a player for years, from watching him with Celtic, in the Prem, Scotland. Quality talent. Him and Ryan Gauld go way back to Dundee United days, and they linked up beautifully. That Portland game, that front four with Pico, absolutely flying. And you're like, oh, this is going to be so good next year. Fafa Pico, we knew was likely to go because he's got family in Miami. Almost weekly, he flew down to Miami, even just for the day, to go and see them. And there was other sort of personal stuff with his family as well that I won't go into. So he wanted to be closer to them. Now, he can't get much closer than where he landed. Yeah. So we knew he was probably going to go. And it's a lot of goals and assists to lose. Stuart Armstrong, it's a lot of potential goals and assists to lose. And that's giant void now that you're looking to fill.
The one name brought in so far is Jayden Nelson, which is an interesting move. I have been a fan of his game for a while. Toronto kind of punted on him at some point, sort of acknowledging that they were not the place he was going to reach his peak. And so they sold him to Europe in an idea of almost the 20% sell-on we get from him at another club is going to be better than what we can turn him into. But he had converted from a winger into a central midfielder in his time in Toronto. And you saw maybe a future there, not similar to Pedro Vite in style, but in terms of that transition of play. And I love when Jayden Nelson has bodies around him and he's able to play in and out of tight spaces really quickly. He's got great feet. And then when he can get out into the open field, he can be exciting. It's a good move, and it felt like it was just can we add a 0.5% here and there to this roster? It's not a replacement for Stuart Armstrong, and that's where you're in a little bit of trouble. There's also one more rumor as we record this that another potential young domestic-y player, although not young anymore, Emmanuel Sabby could be on his way to Vancouver as well. Matthew Hoppe was training with the club. So they are trying to work at the margins, which in theory is fine, Michael, if you're bringing back the whole team, but you've lost a designated player, and so you're no longer in a work at the margins situation. What do you make of the window overall?
I mean, it's been disappointing. And I when I was talking to someone at the Whitecaps, I said, the roster's looking quite grim. And they were like, no, it's not. And it's like, oh, it's looking very grim right now. But there's more pieces on their way, is what we've been told. Now, Nelson, for me, is the like-for-like replacement for Faf Pico. And maybe 12 years younger, I think he is. Yeah. Lit it up at Rosenborg, 8 goals, 8 assists. Wanted to move to a higher league, went to Bundesliga 2, struggled with Ulm. And we spoke to him a couple of weeks ago on our podcast, and he readily admitted it wasn't for him. It was a wrong move. He didn't settle. He didn't like it there. And you didn't see the best Jayden Nelson. So he's come back with a fire under him to show what he can do with 2026 World Cup on the horizon. That's really his motivating factor here. So that I like. We've seen him pre-season. He's already got a goal. He's going to be a player, I think, that if he can get in the box, you're going to see goals and assists from him. And I think it's going to be an exciting addition. It looks like Jesper Sorensen probably most of the time is going to go 4-3-3. So it's going to bring wingers into play that Vanni Sartini did not like wingers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which was interesting then that he signed Fafa Pico to begin with. And then there was issues last year with Fafa not getting playing time. But I remember the Whitecaps do a Christmas media dinner. So we were speaking to Vanni one year, and I was trying to get him to sign Lewis Morgan from New York Red Bulls. And he's like, well, you know what's wrong with that? And it's like, what? It's like, I hate wingers. So I think we're going to see wingers now with Vancouver. And Sabi is obviously another winger. He can play through the middle as well. I'm not sold on that one. The rumours are they're paying €1 million transfer fee for him. I don't even necessarily see him as a starter, but if you're paying €1 million, I guess he's a starter. Yeah. Hasn't done great with Le Havre. I don't know too much about him. I know that he got 1 cap for the US. I'm glad we didn't sign Hoppe, I've got to say, because another striker in Vancouver that can't score is the last thing that we kind of need just now. We've had so many of them in the last 12 years. Now, for me, the big gap is, as you say, replacing Stuart Armstrong in the centre of the park. But JJ Adams at the Province newspaper here spoke to Axel Schuster on last Friday, and that doesn't seem to be what is on the cards as the replacement. They're looking more in the attack as opposed to in the midfield. Yeah. And it doesn't sound like they're going to use the designated player spot and they're going to go down the under-22 initiative route. And that's a concern.
Yeah. It has been an interesting roster build, as I said. Some of these moves are interesting of like, if you're going to take a flyer, if you don't have, if you're trying to take risks here or there, the problem is you do have to get better and you do have to replace some pieces. Let's go to our Matt Doyleism for a moment, and then we'll jump off the back of that.
The Caps, man. I guess last year's playoffs where they won 5-0 at Portland and then played great, but ultimately came up a little short against LAFC. I guess that was the high point, because they added Stuart Armstrong as that third DP in the summer, and it didn't look like it was going to work out. But then he got healthy down the stretch and into the playoffs, and he gave them that extra level that allowed them to go toe to toe with LAFC in a way that they hadn't been able to go toe to toe with them or any of the top teams in the region over the past couple years. And so I was excited to see them build on that and head into 2025. But Armstrong is gone. Fafa Picault, who was a big part of last year's success, he's gone. And Vanni Sartini's gone. They decided to change the coach after the 3 most successful years by far of their MLS existence. So I don't really understand any of that in any real way. And then, there's not been much investment to speak of in this offseason. So it's just back to sort of hoping that Brian White and Ryan Gauld can be awesome and hoping that Ali Ahmed and Pedro Vite can somehow find another level. I'm not sure what formation they're going to be playing, though we saw in preseason it's probably going to be a 4-3-2-1 Christmas tree. I don't hate that, but I'm not sure that it gets the best out of anyone other than Gauld. I don't know. Like, this shouldn't be a bad team, but if you look at how the rest of the West has conducted business this offseason, it's hard to see them taking a step forward and building on that positive momentum that they found in October and November. And as someone who really liked watching that team play, I'm really disappointed by that.
So the words there of Mr. Matt Doyle, mimicking a lot, I think, of what you had already said and sort of some of the question marks on the roster. Talked a little about that formation. You mentioned 4-3-3, something similar, and setting up that way. Let me start with this, which, though, is the question mark on all of this is that the strength last year, 4th best defense, you could say, in the Western Conference, that back, whatever you want to call it, 5, 6, 7, 8, like the defense, goalkeeper in through that base at midfield, that's all returning. So there is this platform of success that has existed. And the question, and I think Doyle put it well there, is has the rest of the West sort of jumped while Vancouver, even with that strength, has remained the same?
Yeah, that is, for me, the big aspect to this. And we see it a lot, that the other teams in the West improve and the Whitecaps either don't or just very small increase in improvements. And I think that is the big thing. You look at San Jose, what they've done, and they're not going to be bottom next year, or this year. If they are, I'll be stunned by that. So they've got longer or they've got a bigger distance to kind of go from bottom into the playoffs. And yeah, they need to make these big pieces, but the Whitecaps don't have far to fall to be out of the playoff spots.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing here. I don't see this as a playoff squad. I don't see us having a playoff starting 11 if everyone was healthy and could play the whole game. It's too early to tell. I think there is a chance there's a DP comes in the summer again. We haven't had a good history of summer DPs coming here. Actually, we haven't had a good history of DPs kind of in general here. As much as I'd like more Scottish players here, I think we kind of need to steer away from them now. It's not been the most successful outside of Ryan Gauld. Pedro Vite was mentioned there, and I think I have been disappointed that he hasn't grown as much as I hoped he would. So this is a huge year for him. He also wants to feature more for the national team. Andres Kubis as well. You speak about that back defence, back seven or whatever. Kubis is key to that. And when Kubis was injured or suspended last year, you saw it really affected the team. There's been talk that he wants to move on to a bigger team as well to try and solidify his place with Paraguay for the World Cup. Lose him, and that midfield is in big, big trouble. The midfield, for me, needs a couple of pieces coming in.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like that is happening. The pieces that we have here in the midfield, I don't see being strong enough to handle what the rest of the West has out there.
Yeah, Pedro Vite is one where he came in and it felt like he was an attacking, young piece. And I think he's found his way in a bit more of a, central midfield ball progressor. I think he hits a really good through ball from deep, but is not this, elite MLS attacking 10 and chance creator and goal scorer. And I don't know if that is who he is, right? At this point, it feels like what he's become, he's good at. I don't know if he can elevate his game, and that's that next step. That would be the question mark is, okay, he's gotten on the field, speed of play, physicality, he's reached the level all there. Can he step forward and become one of these pieces? Because you are looking at this team and you're asking who can elevate from last year, who can get better. I do think Ali Ahmed is one of them just because he hasn't really played one position a ton at the pro level that long. And so it feels like every week he plays, he can be one who can continue to improve and get better. Nelson, the same. We have our own over-unders that Andrew Wiebe gives us every single time. And this is sort of his question. And it's on Brian White. He set the line for MLS goals at 14.5 goals. Brian White scored 15 goals in MLS the last 2 years. I think it was 12 the year he got traded to Vancouver before that. So not a full season. So basically his rate has been 15 a season. And we be asking here, does he maintain that? Does he go higher? Or is this the year maybe that he falls off? One thing to think about is he also might be around the national team for the Gold Cup, which could affect how much time he plays for Vancouver on top of this. What do you make of that line and where do you sort of fall?
Have we had clarification yet? If the tariffs come in, do Canadian goals have an extra 25% put on them? And does Brian White count as a Canadian? Without that, I say under.
It is that's over my pay grade 100%.
I think under the 15 or under the 14.5. He's punched above his weight these two career seasons in a row. Yeah. I mean, if he has 3, fair credit to the lad. I think a lot depends. Like if Nelson can get flying and send those balls in, if Sabi can send the balls in from the wing as well, if he has that connection with Ryan Gauld, it's very possible. He has to be able to finish better.
Mm-hmm.
He had a couple of bad misses in the playoffs that really cost Vancouver dear. That is why he's with Vancouver. That's why he's in MLS. And he's not over in Europe. He's not that clinical finisher. But I go with the under. I think 12 to 14. And I take that right now.
Yeah. He's lived there for most of his time, as you said. He has his runs of games where he's confident and finishing and taking aggressive shots. That's one of the big things with Brian White is sometimes he forgets he's a center forward and he wants to help set his teammates up and he wants to work hard for the team. Like all things you appreciate, but unfortunately, to be the mentality of a striker, sometimes you can't be that person. And Brian White has always sort of floated in between the two. And so far, eventually, he's found his way back to that 15 goals with Vancouver, which puts you into really nice conversation, right? We're talking 19 goals have been Golden Boot winners in MLS, have been MVPs in Major League Soccer at 20 goals. Like, you're starting in that conversation, hence getting called into the national team on the border of things around January camps. I think he can do it again because I think he puts himself in dangerous places. He has a few abilities, one being his ability to win 50-50s, whether it's aerial, whether it's on the ground. Like, he will throw his body in the way for a ball and try and get on the end of things. The question becomes service, though. He doesn't create his own chances. And as you said with Jayden Nelson, that's the real question mark for this team. When we've looked at Vancouver the last few years, good defensively, borderline good, if not great at times. Finishing, it's that chance creation and that one ability to make something special happen, especially against a set defense that hasn't been there. Now we don't have Stuart Armstrong to be that answer. So the question is if there's one there and if it'll be able to come together. Well, I guess we're going to sit around and I'll wait and see this year. It was not the preview I expected. I think if you had asked 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, what Vancouver would look like, I think we were all kind of like, this will be the most boring one. It's the same team. Again, everything's the same. And a lot is, but the parts that are different feel absolutely massive. We use the term turbulent a lot in this conversation, and it continues to be. But either way, you should follow it at AFTN. That is the place for all of your Canadian soccer coverage, as well as your Vancouver coverage, Whitecaps, CPL as well, NSL coming into the market this year. So a lot of exciting stuff going on with the game north of the border, but especially in the Pacific Northwest. And you should definitely tune in to follow along. Michael, I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we'll have you back for some fun convos throughout the year.
Yeah, hopefully. It's been a pleasure, David. So hope you enjoyed the chat there with David Gass. Follow SoccerWise on all the social media platforms, and you can listen to their podcasts 3 times a week and check out all their stuff on their YouTube channel as well, SoccerWise HQ. But that is nearly it now for this episode of the show. But of course, we can't finish without bringing you this episode's Wavelength. And for new listeners to the show, Wavelength is the part of the podcast where we play a song all about football. It could be by a band, a singer, footballers themselves, or football teams. The thing they've got in common is they're all about football. Last episode, we played you the first of 2 football-themed songs from the artists behind our album of the month for February, English band Pop Will Eat Itself. And this is their second football song, released in 2014 for the FIFA World Cup in Brazil, having a go at what FIFA has done to the beautiful game. This is Pop Will Eat Itself. Reclaim the game. Funk FIFA.
Ceremony
desenvolver existe por si só e não depende da FIFA. Mas a FIFA sim, depende desse patrimônio pra manter a firma. Corrupção, dissimulação, pela decifrão. A FIFA é apenas igual a qualquer governo do planeta. A mesma linha de ação. Dia e noite só botando no fuleco da população. Mas aqui não.
Reclaim the game of FIFA. Reclaim the game of FIFA. Reclaim the game, Brazil. Reclaim the game, 2014. Who's got the skills to thrill? That shows the dice. Who wants the bill? Who pays the price? Brazil. Reclaim the game of FIFA. Reclaim the game of FIFA. Who passed the test? The FIFA best. Who need the best to smash the rest? I need the protest. Reclaim the game, Brazil. Reclaim the game, 2014. Reclaim the game of FIFA.
From 2014, Pop will eat itself, Reclaim the Game, Funk, FIFA. And look forward to seeing what songs might come out for the 2026 World Cup. So that is it now for the show. Felipe, thank you for jumping on and joining me late on Thursday night. Before you go, let everyone know where they can find your stuff online.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, though less and less now. Because of very obvious reasons, at FelipeV_FC, or you can find me on Blue Sky as well, under the same name, FelipeVFC.bluesky.social, where I'll be trying to post a lot more. You can also find my work on AFTN, as I'm going to be writing more and more about the Whitecaps and also the Vancouver Rise when that starts popping up more. And I'm also writing for Northern Tribune, for CPL, Vancouver FC, a little bit of the Rise as well. And lastly, of course, my podcast at Coast to Coast FC, who we're starting to do a lot more things now for the upcoming CPL season. So a lot of places you can find me, and hopefully if you do find me on there, you like what you hear or you like what you read, and you can follow me there.
Definitely check out all his stuff, especially the podcast, and it's going to be a good CPL season. We'll talk about the Rise in the next episode, I think, as well. I've got some Steph LeBay audio to bring for that, and we'll talk about the fixtures coming out and some other stuff around the league. But that is it for now. We'll be back with another episode soon. Give me a follow, AFTN Canada on Twitter, AFTN on Blue Sky, AFTN Canada on YouTube. Until next time, as always, thanks for listening. Take care. And mon the Caps.
Going to your first match is an experience you never forget. The atmosphere of what's going on around the pitch looks beautiful, and you always look and go, wow, I'd love to play here one day. If you get the bug, it's going to stay with you for life.
10 minutes left. Yeah, but there's still some time. It's not the final score. We need more than the numbers we're given. Show us you live and breathe the game. You're more than a name. That's what we came for. We can bring you more than the score. Every story. Let's take this thing off of the field into the real world, away from the numbers, away from the numbers.